with fellow commissioners, Commissioner Routh, Vice Chair Pouncil, Commissioner Alexander, and Commissioner Patel. And joining virtually, we have Commissioner Lang, Vice Chair Thompson, and Commissioner Spivak. So we are going to start with any items of interest from our commissioners tonight. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Rouse.
Yeah, just briefly. I think like many of us, I spend on an average week talking to a lot of people, and no one is okay right now. And I just, especially as we're going to be talking about a hearing, we're going to be talking about things like bird glazing, but and eco roofs, but I feel like there's a small piece, I think, of a lot of us that are weighted with this incalculable suffering that we are experiencing and we are witnessing. And I think that one thing that I have always really appreciated about a lot of these deliberations is how everyone brings their full selves, their full heart to these conversations. And so I just want to note that sometimes when the weight of the world feels heavier, that it can be more difficult to find compassion. And so I just want to thank everyone for being here, for taking this time, just acknowledge that the heaviness that we all experience through this, even as we are talking about things that might be very far from where part of our heart is. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Routh. Appreciate that. Next up, we have an item about the BPS Budget Advisory Committee, and this email was sent out to commissioners. Staff is seeking one member of the commission to participate in the Budget Advisory Committee. There are 4 meetings, and I believe, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, but they kick off November and through January, is that right? Okay, do we have a commissioner interested in participation? It is 4 meetings over that 4 to 5 month period. Okay, I'm checking online to see if any hands are going up. And I did offer that I could participate. There was the caveat that I would potentially miss one meeting, but I think that can be accepted, especially since we don't have another volunteer. that is fine. I'll look forward to participating since it will be my first time. So go ahead and put me down as the commission volunteer for that. And moving on now to director's report. Patricia, anything for us this evening?
Okay, I'm going to have to lean awkwardly. Can you hear me now? Does that working? Okay. Sorry that I'm not going to be looking at you, but good evening. Patricia Diefendorfer, Chief Planner for the record. Just wanted to let you know about a couple of things. One thing in particular wanted to let you know that on October 11th, 2023, just a couple weeks ago, City Council voted unanimously to adopt updated floodplain regulations. The zoning code amendments were heard by the former PSC. So that was an item that the PSC did make a recommendation on. Council adopted a package of regulations that included both zoning code amendments and building code amendments that will improve floodplain habitat mitigation and reduce flood risks in applicable areas of the city's floodplains. Some of those provisions of both ordinances go into effect in March 2024, and others will go into effect October 2025. But it's actually October 2024, forgive me. Wanted to just thank the former PSC whose letter kind of really recommended to council that those amendments in the 2 codes, the building code and the zoning code, go together, and ultimately that is what we did. So that was great. Another thing that we wanted to just surprise the commission of is that the city council will begin having their meetings in this space as the council chambers are being built out to accommodate the future new, larger city council. So just wanted to let you know that we are working with the Office of Management and Finance to ensure that our planning commission schedule is disrupted as little as possible. Generally, it's not expected to be an issue because of the days that council meets, but there may be an occasional conflict on a Tuesday when a council might have a work session on a Tuesday, in which case we would just have to coordinate. We would try to give you as much notice as possible if there's going to be any kind of conflict. So in advance, we just want to thank you for your patience and flexibility as we work through all of that. So I think that concludes my director's report for the time being. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Moving on now to our consent agenda. We have consideration of the minutes from our October 10th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve the October 10th, 2023 minutes?
I so move, Stefrath.
Okay, and do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Patel. All in favor? Aye. Okay, minutes approved. Perfect. Okay, so we are transitioning now to our housing regulatory relief item of the agenda. I would like to invite up Sandra Wood, Phil Namany, and Jill Chen. This is a public hearing. We will have a quick overview of the project from staff, and then we will go ahead and get into public testimony. Just a note that we will be limiting public testimony to 2 minutes, given the amount of individuals we have signed up to testify tonight. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to staff. Welcome to provide the project overview.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair O'Mara. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Sandra Wood. I'm the Co-Development Manager at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. With me is Phil Namany, who's the Project Manager for this project, and Jill Chen from the Portland Housing Bureau, who's going to be joining us for this conversation. We have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm just going to go ahead right into it. We're here to hold a hearing for the Housing Regulatory Relief Project. We published our proposal to the Commission in September and briefed the Commission immediately afterwards on September 26th. We expect and hope to present the Commission's recommendation at a public hearing at City Council in December. Since we were here last month, we have been conducting additional outreach. We've directly presented to the groups
Sandra,
listed.
Yes. I think that there may be having trouble hearing you up here. I think the sound, once again, is sort of better in the audience than it is here on the dais, and that's a bit of a
So
concern.
I'll just speak up. Can you hear me this way? Okay.
And maybe if the open signal folks can see if there's anything they can do about that. It definitely is much more, it's audibly much quieter over here.
All right.
That's one of the other feedback.
Thank you, Open Signal. Okay, well, I'll just try to speak up and we all will try to do that today. So since we were here last month, we have conducted quite a bit more outreach. We've directly presented to the groups listed on this slide. And of course, we've sent official notice to 300 or so individuals or organizations. In addition, the meeting has been publicized to almost 10,000 people through BPS's e-news and the BDS's Plans Examiner, so those have a far reach. And finally, we also reached out to people who participated in the housing production survey that BDS conducted, and that was about 3,000 people. I want to actually thank Phil for all of his efforts conducting outreach this month. He's been really busy talking to people on the phone, going to meetings, and those types of things. I think the breadth of the opinions that you'll hear today and that you've already received in public testimony shows that these proposals have been really well publicized. The written testimony, we actually are up to 200 pieces of testimony as of a few moments ago when we stopped checking. And I hope that you've had an opportunity to read some of that testimony. We've observed that about 2/3 of the testimony have expressed concerns about eco roofs and and bird safe glazing proposals. There have been also quite a bit of testimony about bike parking and neighborhood contact requirements. There also are some letters of support and appreciation that the city is doing something. That's what we've heard also in some of the meetings that we've been at. Before we provide more information on the topics that I've highlighted, which Phil will get into, we wanted to just take a moment to remind the Commission of why this project was initiated in the first place. I know last time we were here, we spoke about the response to the housing crisis and the input received from the Housing Production Survey. But we wanted to take a step back and emphasize that what we're trying to do is impact what we can control at this time to close the development feasibility gap, which is shown in red on this slide. This is a new slide to you, but it's an old slide to City Council. This one and the next one are borrowed from a council work session on housing held this summer. The blue column on the far left shows funding sources that are necessary for a development proposal to come together. The gray column reminds us that the cost of development lands in several categories listed there. You know, there's the cost of the land and the soft cost for engineering and architecture plans and the hard cost for the projects itself, not to mention interest rates and the developer's fee. Phil will actually show a prototype later with real life examples of what those costs break down to in one prototype example. So it's not a secret that the cost of every category has actually decreased dramatically in the recent years. The far right column illustrates that when you compare the costs with what the market can bear, there's a development feasibility gap in today's market. In the work session, economists shared that for housing to be built in today's market, costs either have to come down or rents have to go up. More likely, it's a combination of both. They pointed to market actions that can help make development feasibility more financially feasible. Among them were increased rents, which of course is not desirable, decreasing hard costs, or lowering interest rates, which we actually don't have control over. They also pointed to city actions that could help. This we do control. Incentives and reducing time for permit approvals or reducing code requirements were suggested. So that's where the Housing Regulatory Relief Project is solving for. And we understand that this is just a piece of the puzzle, not the full puzzle, but it is a piece nonetheless. So the proposal, as a reminder that we have before you, is pretty simple. It's to temporarily suspend some rules for a period of 5 years and permanently clarify some of those rules that will apply when the rules go back into effect. Wanted to clarify something that we've heard from community groups, and there's some confusion that the 5-year time period is actually written into the code and would require that this body, the Planning Commission, and then City Council again amend the code to either extend the time or to change those rules permanently. It's not, we'd have to be proactive about that. There are 16 issues that are addressed in the proposal. The ones in bold are those that are generating the most interest, and you'll probably hear most about during the testimony today. So what we have on deck for today is that Phil will provide some additional information about kind of those top 5 issues, including the cost impacts of some of the rules, and that was a question that commissioners had at our last meeting. We have also invited, as I mentioned, Jill Chen from the Portland Housing Bureau to present their experiences building affordable housing and complying with these regulations. We also have 2 invited testifiers who have experience with both market rate and affordable housing. And once the presentations are done, we can move on to public testimony. So with that, I will pass it to Phil to begin with bike parking. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra, and good evening, commissioners. Phil Namoney with the City of Portland Planning and Sustainability, and I'm going to quickly go over some of the proposals that we provided over the briefing, but then provide some additional background information that came up during the briefing. I'm going to start with the bicycle parking changes. If you recall, bike parking was the #1 response in terms of volume of responses to this housing survey back in March. And As a recap, there's three things that we're proposing. We're looking at proposing temporary reduction to the long-term bike parking for residential uses. We are suspending the large or cargo bike parking space, and we're making some permanent clarifications that'll allow some more flexibility for putting bike parking in the unit. These temporary changes are addressing concerns that we've heard about underused bike parking rooms in new development and the loss of dwelling units that can sometimes occur when the space is being used by those bicycle rooms. I will be sharing some costs on these things in the near future here, but I wanted to go over kind of the three things that have come up quite a bit. Ground floor active use and height. This is the slide you saw back in September. All the changes we're proposing in this are temporary in nature for 5 years, but we are proposing to temporarily suspend the active use requirements, which includes the prohibition on dwelling units in the central city on the ground floor. So with this suspension, ground floor could have dwelling units facing these streets. We're also suspending the use limitations in centers and Main Street overlay zones, and we're temporarily waiving some of the ground floor height standards that apply outside of the central city. Lastly, we're making some changes to the window provisions. And our hope is that by being more flexible in the placement of ground floor units and also allowing more flexibility in whether ground floor is used for dwelling units or commercial space, that we have the ability to potentially allow more dwelling units to be placed in these buildings. If a project is proposing housing and is going through a design review, they'll have the option of going through a lower design review process. So a type 3 review, which would normally trigger the hearing, would be able to go through the type 2 staff review with the DAR, and then the type 2 review could go through a type 1X review. So in all these three cases, the reason why I lumped them together is these are three situations where Bay Area Economics, BAE, provided some cost estimates for the inclusionary housing study that the Housing Bureau is working on. And so I will get to that in a little bit, but I know there were some conversations about how the impact affects the ground floor area from a geographic standpoint. So this map, it's not in great detail. It's a little blown out, but it shows areas where we have ground floor use and design requirements. And as you can see, things that are in yellow have a use requirement, things that are in blue have a height requirement, and things that are in green, including the central city, have both a use and a design or height requirement. The gridded streets in the central city are the streets where we both have a height requirement and prohibit dwelling units on the ground floor. So this would potentially allow dwelling units to be on the ground floor on all those streets. We did some calculations on the amount of streets that this would impact in the central city. This would impact about 20% of the street frontage that's in the central city plan district. We also looked at commercial zoned streets outside the central city, and these provisions affect about 13% of the streets. So this suspension would impact those portions of the streets. I do want to mention also that there are some areas of the city that have a design overlay that also have some requirements if they elect to go through standards. We did not include those here because it kind of added some confusion to the map, but keep in mind that that would potentially add some other areas where there would be some impacts.
And a quick clarification, Phil, the yellow streets are 13% of the streets that are commercially zoned.
Well, the yellow and blue.
Yeah, yellow and blue.
Yeah, outside of the central city. Correct. There were some conversations about, and I know there's some testimony about what may happen if these standards are waived. We do acknowledge that there's a lot of ways that you can put dwelling units on the ground floor. We just kind of provided three illustrations here to kind of indicate that. We do recognize that there'll probably be some situations where the treatment of the ground floor may be more residential in nature, and other cases where they may still treat it in a way that has common area and has maybe a more of a welcoming look to the public realm. But we do feel pretty comfortable that there's other provisions in our code, such as in the base zones, that do ensure or at least encourage that ground floor dwelling units relate to the public realm in a positive way. We have some setback and raised floor provisions that are in the base zones. So I promised to give some cost information. This is some information from Bay Area Economics that was part of that inclusionary housing calibration study that will be released shortly. But this is some preliminary information that BAE provided to staff. They looked at 5 different prototypes to see what the effect was on these 3 types of design standards: the bike parking rooms, the required ground floor. They looked at it from a commercial standpoint, and also the design review piece. But we wanted to kind of provide an overview about what the costs were for one of these prototypes. And we chose one that we've seen, a type of prototype that we've seen in probably a lot of the commercial corridors around the city. Maybe not in the central city, but along a lot of the corridors. And that's sort of the mostly multifamily project. This one had 64 units, provided some tuck-under parking, and provided a 2,500 square foot ground floor retail space. And that kind of shows, Sandra had that slide that kind of showed how costs are often portrayed across the spectrum. This kind of shows the variety of costs between the land costs, the construction costs, architectural fees, and things like that. And this project was estimated to be up almost $20 million. So looking at the costs of these 3 elements, the consultant looked at placing all the bike spaces in a dedicated room or multiple dedicated rooms. So for a 64-unit building closer into downtown, that would require 96 bike parking spaces, approximately 1,950 square feet.
Currently.
Right.
Yeah.
They estimated that, these are all current impacts. And this is the cost of providing all 96 spaces. If you recall, our bike parking proposal is to reduce it partially. But the cost for all of that is about $500,000, which works out to close to $8,000 a dwelling, and works out to about 2.6% of the project cost. Similarly, for ground floor active use, they just proposed to having a 2,500 square foot commercial space set up on the ground floor. And the cost for that was $676,000, which was a little over $10,000 per dwelling unit and about 3.5% of the project hard costs. And then lastly, the design review, that was more focused on the potential costs of an increased time of review and some soft cost increases, such as having to have the architecture consultant firms provide additional drawings for the design hearings. And for that, they came up with an estimate of $170,000 or $2,600 per dwelling, which was a little under 1% cost. So while the focus on this is that on the costs, we do want to mention that the idea of allowing some of this floor area to be used for something other than these required standards would provide opportunity to potentially increase the number of dwelling units in these proposals. Specifically, like the ground floor active use, if that 2,500 square feet were able to be turned into 2 or 3 dwelling units, that would provide some additional benefit. Touching on the eco roof and bird safe glazing, this is also a slide you saw back in September, but just wanted to restate what the proposal is, which is temporarily suspending the eco roof and bird safe glazing standards, which mostly apply in the central city. The bird safe glazing also applies in the River South Reach. And the intent, of course, with this suspension was to temporarily reduce some of the regulatory costs for new construction, and once again with the emphasis on the central city. We did worked with our central city team to determine the types of development that have come in and what we've seen since those regulations came into play, which was in 2018 with the Central City 2035 plan. We estimated there were about 22 projects that have come in since those regulations came into effect. What we found is that actually there are no adjustments or modifications that have been asked for bird safe glazing in those cases. There have been 5 modifications requested and granted for a reduction or removal of the eco roof requirements. Generally, I think there might have been one case where they actually removed the eco roofs entirely, but they were providing solar panels instead. In a lot of cases, the modifications have been for a reduction from the requirement. Once again, this is about 20% of the projects, and our thought on this is that by suspending this, potentially it would give people more flexibility to be able to do these kind of options by right without having to add that to their review. We did not have cost estimates from BAE on eco roofs or bird surf glazing, but we do have an older cost study from Eco Northwest when these provisions were first being considered for the Central City Plan. The Eco Northwest looked at a wide variety of projects from high-rise to industrial buildings, and so there was some variation in the cost, but this kind of gives you an overview of those costs. Eco roofs were about 0.6 to 1% of the project costs. Bird safe glazing was considerably less than that. There was sort of the caveat that these can always vary by application. And I also want to mention that from the eco roof standpoint, the suspension of the eco roof requirements from the zoning code does not give them exemption from meeting our stormwater management manual. So in a lot of cases, you'll find that, or an applicant will find that providing an eco roof is the most cost-effective way to handle stormwater, or is at least better than setting aside land for stormwater retention ponds or dry wells. So, and this does not factor in the fact that there's that cost of meeting that manual. The last thing I want to touch on is the neighborhood contact piece. And as you know, we have received some testimony on that. I expect some folks tonight will be testifying on that. Both of there's two temporary suspensions or temporary. There's a temporary change to the neighborhood contact piece, and there's a permanent simplification. The permanent simplification is going from 3 neighborhood contact options down to 2. And I do want to mention that these neighborhood contacts do occur before an applicant submits an application for land use or permit. So these are generally done outside of the city involvement. And there's sort of an initial conversation that either initial posting or initial conversation that the applicant will have with the neighborhood. I do want to clarify that while these changes temporarily suspend the initial notification or communication for that upcoming meeting, they don't impact the actual notification process used for land use reviews, which is dictated by state law and is still being followed. They also would not impact any additional notification processes that BDS does for other types of meetings, such as pre-application conferences or the design advice requests that go through Design Commission. So those, BDS still does a certain notification process, and those will be followed. I do want to mention, though, that on a permanent basis, the thresholds for having preliminary meeting when the project's in the design overlay zone would go from a 10,000 square foot threshold up to 25,000 square foot threshold to match the other situations where a meeting's required. So that is changing the threshold for that. There was some conversation in September about how this project fits in with other city projects and other city policy changes for encouraging housing and helping with rental tenants. We did provide a table that was actually is going to be part of our housing production strategy report to be released, I believe, either early next year, sometime in the future. Okay. And that had a wide range of programs that have been undertaken since Inclusionary Housing program got started. I'm just summarizing a few on here, but they generally run the gamut from zoning code changes to our tax abatement programs, financial resources for certain types of housing, all the way to stabilization programs and tenant assistance programs. And so just wanted to mention that, we've kind of fit in there as another regulatory piece on that. So I'm going to pass this on to Jill, and she's going to give you her experiences with the Housing Bureau.
Thank you so much. Okay.
And how do I make this bigger?
Okay. Just for the record, I'm Jill Chen. I'm the Housing Investments and Portfolio Preservation Manager with the Portland Housing Bureau. So I want to really thank you all for the opportunity to speak about the Housing Regulatory Relief Project. We're very,
Do you want to do that, or do you want me to?
you can go ahead. Thank you. We're very pleased to be here, to be in front of the Planning Commission with our partner, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We've been working very closely with them on the housing needs analysis and the housing production strategy. Next slide, please. So what we really want to be able to share with you is just get a better understanding, giving you our understanding of what we're seeing from the production side. I'm the manager who's in charge of working with, say, the Portland Housing Bonds, the Metro Housing Bonds, and working with our partners to help produce the affordable housing that is coming online, and sort of giving you an idea of how some of these policy and code changes impacts the work, and what is the financial impact, and what are we seeing on our residential development. So, as Phil mentioned, one of the first things we did as we looked at housing production and the fact that there's an imbalance was it all came in as part of the PHB and BPS inclusionary housing recalibration. That was one of the works that PHB did in order to understand what was happening in the industry that made production sort of difficult. And we see that. Going to step back first and talk a little bit also about the need itself. Working with BPS, we realize that as we project out for the next 20 years, with the growth of the city as well as inflow, what is the need for production in the city? This particular slide shows you the need based on income strands or income bands. And over the next 20 years, it's about 120,000 of total units needed, which means a production of over 5,000 a year, of which half of that is needed to be affordable. PHB focuses on the lower end, usually the very low income, 38% and below, and 60% and below, but we have some also in the 80% and below. Out of this production, you'll see that out of the 5,200 that's needed, PHB or the city needs to produce about half of that as affordable. As a benchmark, so far, even with the housing bonds, both the Portland housing bonds and the Metro bonds, PHB on an average has produced under 1,000 units. So there's a huge amount that is still needed in order to meet the demands for this city. So we understand we're not going to be able to get bonds all the time, so we need to work across the spectrum. And how can we work with all of the tools that's needed in order to make housing production possible? Next slide, please. But before we look at what are the levers, we also need to understand what are some of the drivers of the cost. Why isn't just production occurring in this city? And as Phil and Sandra mentioned, PHB had hired BAE to help us understand the total cost of construction in the city. And it came sort of a surprise to us, but probably also to everyone, that the average cost on a per unit basis is about $422,000 per unit. We've all heard that a cost to buy is over $500,000 in the city. It was sort of a surprise, I think, for everyone that it's so expensive to produce. But we're still, below Seattle, Sacramento, in line with Denver. But still, it doesn't answer the question, why hasn't production occurred? Next slide, please. So you'll see that one of the reasons we looked at why it hasn't occurred is Sandra showed the chart about the cost and what are the, the sources of funding. So you'll see that the cost since 2016 has increased by 50% across all, you can call it prototypes. However, the Portland median income has only increased by 29%, and rent rates have only increased by 24%. For most production, the rent rates is what keeps or what provides your income in order to pay for your debt in order to construct these buildings. So there's an obvious something is not right when we cannot. We don't have the rents, and the cost of construction has gone crazy. For PHB, average cost of affordable units is actually a little bit higher than the 422. It's higher than that because most of our buildings require a lot of community space. We're working with vulnerable populations that need more, say, food pantries, playgrounds. We're working with more, they need resident service offices. So that makes it even more expensive. And we're also working predominantly, in family size, creating family size units. This is just an average for an average unit. So the cost for us is incredibly important, and the impact on regulatory impact on the cost as well. Next slide, please. So how does the city influence housing development? What can we do to help produce more units? So these are sort of buckets that look at how do we, as a city, what are the levers we have to produce more units? The overarching one across the board that impacts every single income bucket is regulatory changes. That impacts you can call it the very low income all the way to market rate. And what we're talking about today is the zoning and the code changes. But I work primarily on that left side, which is providing funding and offering of incentives. But code also makes a big impact. Next slide. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of these. Ground floor is one that has been raised as an issue and discussed already by Phil, as well as bike parking and some about delays. Just wanted to talk about ground floor. And I should mention that all the code for every affordable housing project, there are no exemptions. Our projects meet every single code, regardless of, if it's ground floor, bikes, bird glazing. Affordable is just the same as market rate. There's no exemptions. So ground floor makes a difference because for ground floor activation, even if a particular area is zoned for commercial, many of our affordable developers will not necessarily put commercial on the ground floor because by putting commercial, our projects are impacted by prevailing wage. And that means it's fully prevailed, which will impact the whole cost of the project. And that increases the cost, which increases subsidy, which means it's harder to finance. So you'll see that many of our affordable projects have, instead of commercial ground floor, is community space. You have drive down, especially areas such as MLK. There are a lot of our buildings along that street, and it's mostly community space. Unfortunately, that community space may be oversized because instead of having, say, a work-live unit, it has to be compliant with code. We've also had certain occasions where the affordable, for example, the picture on the right, that is Louisa Flowers, it is required to have a commercial condo. It is currently vacant. It's been vacant since it has been constructed. So the affordable is required to carry the load, the operations, the lights, the utilities, the security and safety of an empty ground floor. Whereas if it was more flexibly zoned, it might have been used as maybe a work-live space again. So we're giving up some space that could have been used for additional units And unfortunately, if we're hopeful that with this code change, we might be able to have more units on the ground floor as well. Next slide, please. Bike parking is another one that had been mentioned. And those are some space. We comply, again, with code. And I've heard in certain units, in certain buildings, bike parking is definitely needed, especially for some of those that are family-sized, where the kids have their bikes, they want the bikes. But in some of the other buildings, especially for seniors and those that are maybe disabled, we're still following and complying with code. So in those particular buildings, it's sort of an empty space. And if we could be more flexible, that's where I think it could be a win-win for everyone, where the units could be increased, maybe another unit could be added, maybe 2 units could be added, and then we can have more production and still comply and meet with the needs of the population. I did not mention, I don't have a picture for it, but I did want to say one of the issues that we were talking about is community outreach and the needs. Most of our projects love to work with the community. We want to make sure our affordable housing projects are welcomed in that community. But there has been many occasions, I shouldn't say many, a few occasions where NIMBYism has become really, really difficult. I know of one project that's been delayed for 5 years. And as a sort of rough rule of thumb, just wanted to give you sort of benchmark is over the last year, what we had seen was that for each month of delay, hard cost construction was going up by 1% per month. So if you had a $20 million project, I mean, 1% is 200,000. By the couple of months, you're like, I don't want to say a million, but it's close. We had a number of projects that was in that same situation where it's just because of the different delays, the reviews. If we could expedite that, I think it would help our developers a lot in terms of certainty and the cost, but more recently also certainty in terms of interest rate fluctuations. Just want to thank you. Thank you all so much, and if there's any questions.
Thank you to the presenters. I don't think we are taking questions from the audience at this time, since we'll be proceeding to public testimony here in a few minutes. I know we do have invited testimony, but before that, any additional
Nope,
comments
that's where
from
we're
staff?
headed.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have 2 individuals who have experience with housing projects in Portland and served on the inclusionary housing and calibration stakeholder group. So I will invite, one of them is virtual, Sarah Zahn, if hopefully you're here. Oh, Sarah, there you are. Can you please introduce yourself and provide your testimony? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me to provide testimony this evening. My name is Sarah Zahn, and I'm a Director of Development for Security Properties. I'm also a 15-year resident of Portland, and I have a background in both affordable and market rate housing development. I've also served 6 years as a commissioner on the Portland Housing Advisory Commission. I'm currently the vice chair of the ULI Northwest District Council, and I'm the current president of Oregon Smart Growth. This summer, I had the opportunity to serve on the Inclusionary Housing Work Group, which looked at calibrating our inclusionary housing policy, which also spent time, as you know, looking at the BAU study on the housing regulatory relief recommendations that we're talking about this evening. Just for background, Security Properties has 2 projects under construction in Portland today, totaling 590 units. And we have another project in entitlements. That project is moving forward through design review, but it does not have its financing identified as of yet. I want to thank the city for its recent focus on how to encourage housing production. As we are all aware, we are woefully behind on meeting our goals and the needs of our community across all housing income levels. Many local land use and building requirements support laudable goals that we all support, including climate resilience, renewable energy, active and safe pedestrian sidewalks and streets, and transportation choices. These are things that we love about Portland. However, too often these local requirements have the unintended consequence of making it far more difficult to build places for people to live. Developers today are faced with multiple pressures that make it difficult to produce new housing. Jill talked a lot about that in her prepared statement, and I'm here to just bolster that. High interest rates are making financing scarce and challenging. A tremendous increase in construction costs over the past 5 years has created more pressure. At the end of the day, we as developers need to give our investors, whether institutional or private equity, a reasonable return on their investment when they invest with us. We are already facing headwinds in our Portland market, and investors have choices on where to invest their money. I know some of my colleagues will provide testimony this evening on some of the specific changes before you in this package and their experiences with some of them. Each of these changes on their own, they only add up to a relatively small dollar value based on total project cost, but when you add them all together, they begin to have a truly meaningful impact on a project. So I would urge you not to fall to the temptation of slicing and dicing this into a list of no's and yeses. Finally, I want to encourage the city to continue to push on other barriers impacting housing production, and in particular to act on the recommendations from the Inclusionary Housing Work Group to make and push through changes on that policy. These are the types of things that we need to see in our city to keep encouraging housing production and help us catch up on our deficit in housing production. Thank you very much for having me here tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony this evening.
Thank you for your testimony and welcoming the next invited testifier. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. My name is Ernesto Fonseca. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Hacienda CDC. We are the largest Latino developer in Oregon. We are currently developing several hundred units across the region from Lake Oswego, Oregon City, Beaverton, Hillsborough, and obviously here in Portland. I want to thank both PHB as well as Sarah for providing this information. I am also in great support on some of the changes that we're providing, that were suggested. Just to give you a quick example on the impacts that some of these code requirements are placing in our community. And this is not just Portland. You know, Portland is also being the thought partner, I would say, of many other jurisdictions across the region, across Metro. The city of Gresham also is implementing some of these policies, you know, such as bike parking across the board and so forth. I am not opposing to many of these codes that have good intentions, but really they don't have a lot of place in some of our communities that we face. What I can tell you is that, for example, in a project that we recently completed, 224 units, $60 million that we spent on that. We could have done about another 8 affordable housing studios to 1 bedrooms if we didn't have to build all of that bike parking that we consistently see more than half empty. Now, we could say that we could reduce that and compromise to some extent, but that has to change to some extent, not only because we have a housing crisis, but also because when we create and develop, you know, policies in code that are absolutist, meaning that they apply to everybody, whether you are a handicapped person, an elderly person, or a place where bike parking really is not that much needed. I have been singing the same song, for example, when saying that a lot of low-income people tend to have physical jobs. They come home, the last thing they want to do is grab a bicycle and start, you know, riding back to their units. It's really not a thing. We've been doing this for over 30 years, and that is one of the least preferred modes of transportation because these people tend to work in different places, you know, depending on the day. Other requirements, you know, such as the bird glazing that brings also cost to the project, the space that is heavily underutilized, and we have an oversupply of commercial space and active space in the city of Portland currently, really don't do us any good altogether. We're losing units across the board that we could be providing to a very, very serious crisis that we're facing, and we're adding costs that is not really bring us any returns in any form or shape. So we are effectively, shooting ourselves in the foot, producing less housing for more cost that we're obligated to do, otherwise we don't get funded, by any jurisdiction. So I am really urging you to consider not only the IH recommendations for IH, but for everything that we do in the city of Portland. Some of these changes that are being proposed are temporary changes. I also understand that people may have environmental concerns. People may have some design concerns in regards to how the city is going to look or not. We developers and the great community of developers, we understand greatly, what needs to happen or not. We're not going to be building a 50-story tower in a neighborhood that has only single-family homes. That's not going to happen. We just want to work on a space where things are a little more flexible. We are not adding cost. That has increased over 50% since 2016, in terms of construction. So where do we draw the line? What can we do to really make this happen in a way that we take the housing crisis very, very seriously? And I want to repeat this that I have also said before, we were able to develop a COVID vaccine because we took it seriously. And we did this in less than a couple of years. And yet, we are not taking the housing crisis seriously, and we continue to see this as a detriment to the economy and the well-being and the peace of the city as a whole. Not to mention that no matter how much dollars we invest in this crisis, we will never be able to keep up if we don't start to really make some changes, not only to code, but also to the building permit process and other things that we're placing on ourselves. With that said, I think I covered what I needed to say. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Before we transition to the general list, I do need to ask if any commissioners have items of disclosure for this item on the agenda. Okay. See none for declaration. We will transition to the public testimony. Again, we have 40 individuals signed up, so we will be limiting comments to 2 minutes per person. We have two commission members from one from design and one from landmarks who we are inviting to speak first. So first I would like to invite Chandra Robinson, and after Chandra, we have Andrew Smith. And I believe Chandra is joining remotely.
I am. I just got moved over.
Welcome. Please go ahead and state your name for the record. And again, we are limiting comments to 2 minutes.
My name is Chandra Robinson, and I am a member of the Portland Design Commission. I also grew up here in Portland and decided after college to come back here because it's such a great city and a better city than lots of the others that I lived in. So I'm proud to be here. Thank you for having me today to share some testimony. The Design Commission has submitted a letter which provides in detail our thoughts on many of the points in the HRR, but what I wanted to focus on mostly was the proposed amendments to the ground floor active use and the height requirement. Design Commission absolutely fully supports making it easier to build housing. We need housing here and in every other city in America, and I think that requires a little bit more flexibility. And the planners have done really great work in the short amount of time that they were given to do this. But this is such an important topic that making decisions based on the work that's been done so far is short-sighted and, I hate to say, irresponsible. These changes are temporary, but the effects are going to be very long-lasting. Buildings can last 50 years very easily now, and whatever changes we make are going to be with us for a long time. So specifically, what you do on the ground floor of buildings correlates very directly to the vitality of the public realm. That's the street, that's where we live our lives, that's where we interact with one another. Changes to the code that waive active ground floor uses and floor height will impact our city negatively. And when these active uses are excluded from the ground floor, there's no eyes on the street. There's streets with less activity can sometimes have higher rates of crime and vandalism. People in ground floor units don't feel safe opening their blinds, so therefore the curtains are always closed. Foregoing active use and adding residential units to the ground floor means that you only get those closed curtains in a blank street. And there is a great way to do ground floor residential, and the commission would be happy to offer suggestions. Retail on streets that are not active is precluded. No one wants to open a business on a street that doesn't have any activity anymore. And changing the code means that we won't likely see any new retail on those streets. But active use does not have to mean retail. It can mean amenities for the residents that live there. And that can be fitness spaces, that can be the lobby, that can be a study room, all of those things, right? Ground floor height standards are there because the ground floor standards are there because retail spaces actually need greater floor to floor heights than residential spaces. And I think the other part is that eliminating the really easy neighborhood contact requirements means the public's not able to comment on projects and hear directly from the development team. And I don't know what the benefit of reducing access to the public on projects impacting their communities would possibly be. So the reason that I urge you to delay the approval of this code is so that public can be engaged fully, and all the planners and developers and Design and Historic Landmarks Commission can really help contribute to a plan that's only going to benefit our city and not continue sort of a downward spiral. I think my time is probably up.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Andrew Smith. I'm the chair of the Portland Historic Landmarks Commission, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the entire Commission. Through our discussion of the Housing Regulatory Relief Code project, the Commission was unified on a few issues. First, we are concerned about the housing challenges being faced by our city, but it is not entirely clear exactly what housing types and levels of affordability are in short supply, although we did just get a glimpse of that in the housing needs analysis. Next, zoning code regulations that were crafted, considered, and discussed by the public over time should not be amended or suspended in a rushed fashion. Any near-term changes to the regulations should be focused on removing barriers and streamlining the process, not on physical changes that we will live with and likely regret for the next 50 or more years. In this light, the Landmarks Commission has comments on 3 of the proposed HRR items. First, ground floor height and active use standard. This is going to sound a little bit redundant with the Design Commission. We should be encouraging architecture that can be reused and adapted, not torn down and replaced. Therefore, the Commission strongly protests allowing ground floors to be constructed with a lower floor-to-ceiling height, which cannot be adapted to future uses. Where residential is located at a ground floor, it should be placed on lower classification streets and must follow existing requirements for setback and floor elevation to ensure equitable housing. 2, neighborhood contact requirements. The Commission is very concerned about limited neighborhood contact. In the whole scheme of a development project, it is not difficult or costly to hold a meeting with the neighbors. They're the ones who will be most affected by a project after all. And 3, design review procedure types for housing. The Commission generally supports the regulation to allow Type 2 review preceded by a design advice request in lieu of a Type 3 review. However, the Commission strongly recommends expanding this regulation only for affordable housing types, which are shown by the housing needs analysis to be the most in need, not to all housing types. Thank you for your considering these items as you develop your recommendations.
Thank you for your testimony.
I just want to celebrate you for bringing up the 1942 War Housing Code, which is something I was also interested in bringing into this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, next up we have Chris Smith and Victor DeWong. Please come forward, and after they provide testimony, we'll have Garrett Sandberg and Bob Salinger. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
No, go ahead and hit the button and pull that close There should be a red light when it's on.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'm Chris Smith. I want to speak to you tonight about bike parking. Given that my time is short, let me jump to my conclusion, which is to ask you to reference the joint letter from Bike Loud and Portland Neighbors Welcome. I'm very glad to see that progressive cycling organizations and progressive housing organizations are on the same page. Their recommendation, which I support, is to move ahead with the bike parking provisions of this code, but then to follow up with a more nuanced process. We believe that there are two benefits to that. One is to find additional space savings that we can only do with more nuanced consideration. I know Victor is going to suggest some of those, but also to make sure that the parking being produced is usable. The policy that you're dispensing with in a few weeks was literally 6 years of policy development in PBOT and then the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, responding to recommendations from the last Bicycle Master Plan in 2010. I served on that steering committee, also responds to mode share goals in the comp plan and TSP. So, we risk some consequences if we don't get this right. And I want to particularly focus on the in-unit parking standard. In removing the ALCO standard, you're reverting to a standard that was in place from 2009 to 2019, and which we know did not produce a lot of usable bike parking. So I really want to see a follow-up group to go back and see if we can keep looking for ways to make that in-unit standard work. The beauty of the in-unit is it gives residents space where they can store a bicycle if they want to, but can also use it for other things if they don't want to store a bicycle. But before the current code, we wound up with hooks on the wall over beds where you could never actually put a bicycle. And I just want to draw one contrast, which is in the prototype from BAE, the cost of bike parking and the cost of auto parking are about the same. And in fact, I believe the bike parking is at least 2x what it really is. I don't agree with their numbers, but we subsidized auto parking with mandates for half a century. Subsidizing bike parking with mandates for a few decades to get to our mode share goals is not a bad thing, and we're continuing to say that we value auto parking economically more than bike parking. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Victor Duong and Garrett Sandberg. I will be calling up two at a time just so that we can efficiently move through the in-person testimony. Welcome, Victor. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Victor Duong. I'm a board member at the Street Trust, a former BAC member, and a project manager at Leap Architects. I have over 20 years experience designing high-density housing projects in Portland, and I'm a first-generation Vietnamese immigrant. Many of my colleagues agree, and I agree, that the bike code needs simplifying and needs to be flexible. I encourage you to refer to the Street Trust letter dated August 23rd, which offers verifiable math-based solutions, encouraging their effectiveness. Our calculations also do confirm that bike parking regulations do remove up to 1 out of 15 units. And please note the Street Trust letter now includes new diagrams that illustrate many of these issues in graphic format. I wanted to highlight 3 elements from that letter. For instance, we are proposing smarter cargo bike solution that proves, that proves that cargo bikes do not need to be cut. 2, remove section D subparagraph 4 will eliminate many of the arbitrary issues tied to bike parking, such as the alcove, the 50% rule, the 15-foot rule, and the prohibition of modifications. And finally, the removal of clearance area and maneuvering area language in the bike code, since it's already covered by ANSI and building egress standards. Finally, I wanted to also share what I've heard from my listening sessions with the Asian communities. People first, then housing, then bikes, in that order. The barrier to cycling isn't the lack of secure bike rooms. The barrier to cycling is the lack of housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Garrett Sandberg, okay, is joining virtually. Okay, go ahead, Garrett. Please state your name for the record. You are on mute, or we can't hear you otherwise. It does look like you have your mic turned off.
Hi there, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. My name is Garrett Sandberg. I am the permit coordinator with DES Development. We're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, infill land developer here in the city of Portland. We typically do multi-unit townhomes and single-family homes, things of that nature. We would like to just start off by saying thank you guys for the work that's been done during RIP 1 and RIP 2 in order to bring affordable housing into our city. It's been of great benefit to us, been great for our community. And I think it's definitely going in the right direction of making development easier for developers and therefore making buying a house easier for our citizens and for people that are wanting to move into our area. Particularly part of that was the new MHLD procedures, which were brought from the state legislature into the city of Portland, and the way it's been integrated. We know it's been kind of a rough road in some areas, but I think it's definitely, like I said earlier, we're taking the right steps moving forward. I'd like to thank some of the people such as Sean Williams or Christian Cooper that have been helping us do that on the review side within the permitting. But there's still been a lot of things that have been difficult for us to navigate, particularly going to this season, with there being inconsistencies with the ways our reviewers have been handled, as well as the ways that code has been interpreted by reviewers and also inspectors, so that we've been having to go back and forth, kind of hassling and wrestling with the city in just order to have all parties on the same page. And so I would like to maybe propose the possibility of, I don't know if there could be commissions involved or things of that nature, but kind of just looking into more of an oversight on how we can kind of have a body to go to, or someone that's like our dedicated person that we're able to bring these appeals to from both the permitting as well as inspection side. Also mentioned previously by one person giving testimonies was the biking restrictions and the requirements. We would like to see people using these more, but honestly, we have not seen a lot of our clientele been desiring that or been using it much. And it's become a barrier of entry, I think, for a lot of people who are wanting to buy homes, not necessarily understanding why these requirements are there, and they'd like to be using this part of the house for something other than bike storage. I think that concludes my testimony.
Thank you very much. Calling up Bob Salinger and Mary Coolidge.
Am I on? Yep. Good evening. For the record, my name is Bob Salinger. I'm the Urban Conservation Director for Willamette Riverkeeper. We are here tonight to testify in strong opposition to the proposals to suspend the city's green roof mandate and the bird safe building mandate. We believe it's essential that the city recognize that we have both a climate crisis and a housing crisis and seek out solutions that address both rather than pitting one against another. Both of these mandates were the product of years and years of community input and extensive public processes. I was part of both of them, and I think this breaks faith with the community to set these things aside in this way. The green roof mandate is essential for reducing stormwater runoff, protecting water quality, reducing urban heat island, reducing heating and cooling costs, and creating habitat. The green roof mandate is essential for reducing one of the most extensive causes of bird mortality in the United States, window collisions, which kill over 1 billion birds every year. And I understand that you all have seen the recent report out of Chicago where over 1,000 birds died in a single night. This is real. Both of these mandates were, at the time of their adoption, put forward at a national level, promoted as reflective of this city's cutting-edge commitment to sustainability. So it's very disappointing to see them being proposed for being rolled back now. The city has not provided a credible basis for rolling them back either. There is no data that suggests that this will have a significant impact on housing. Rather, it's the product of a poll that was sent out primarily to housing developers. We've also heard that this is reflective of pressure coming from the governor. We've been participating with the governor's office on her housing initiative, and it's important to note that the governor has recently announced that she is going to hold environmental and natural resource regulations harmless in her housing legislation. She has recognized that it is important that we take care of both the environment and our housing needs, and in fact, she's now incorporating climate resilience strategies into her housing bill. So the city should follow suit from my perspective. City staff have assured us that these mandates will come back in 2029. I don't believe that will happen. I believe once they're gone, they're basically gone for good. And if we suspend them at a time when we're trying to generate a lot of building, they will not be in place when they could have the most impact. So I will conclude by just saying that Portland needs to maintain a vision of building healthy, sustainable, equitable, affordable landscapes. We recognize the toll that the housing crisis is exacting on our community. It is truly a crisis, but there are better ways, more effective ways to address this than pitting housing against the environment. Thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mary.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Mary Coolidge. I'm the Bird Safe Campaign Coordinator for Portland Audubon. I'm here tonight to convey our opposition to the temporary rollback of the bird safe glazing standard in the housing regulatory relief proposal. My colleague Micah is going to talk about some other elements of the policy, including eco roofs, so I will confine my comments to the bird safe glazing standard. Our North American bird populations have declined by 30% over the last 50 years. Window collisions result in the death of up to 1 billion birds annually in North America. Our birds are in trouble, which is bad news for them, but also has dire implications for whole ecosystems and significantly diminishes the many benefits that birds provide. Although mass collision events are uncommon, recent mortality events in Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia, just to name a few, should give us pause when considering undoing the good work that Portland has done to safeguard our bird populations. The inclusion of bird safe glazing in the Central City Plan was the culmination of nearly a decade of outreach and stakeholder collaboration. Bird safe measures can be synergistic with energy efficiency, reducing HVAC demand, reducing the urban heat island effect, and other common design and performance goals. The standard was expressly written to be integrated with existing affordable housing and downtown street activation goals. And yet the city proposes to roll it back with no data to support that this would actually increase the production of affordable housing. This is a rushed and irresponsible approach that provides no substantiated benefit and no evaluation of the long-term environmental or livability consequences, including increasing bird mortality, increasing the urban heat island effect, increasing Portland's carbon footprint, and reducing our climate resilience. We need solutions with multiple benefits that address our housing crisis, our biodiversity crisis, and our climate crisis simultaneously, rather than those that pit them against each other. Thank you for your time and consideration of these comments.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have Jesse Rollins and Alyssa Starry. Welcome. Jesse, please state your name for the record.
Good. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jesse Rollins, and I am the Senior Policy Manager for Home Forward, Portland and Oregon's largest affordable housing provider. I'm here on behalf of Home Forward to provide testimony in support of the Housing Regulatory Relief Project. We appreciate the Planning Commission and city leaders and staff for having these discussions. This year, the Hattie Redmond, one of Portland's newest affordable housing projects co-developed by Home Forward, opened its doors. Our building provides units that are affordable and accessible to people who need them the most. During our planning for the Hattie Redmond, we can attest that regulatory requirements did affect development and resulted in increased time and cost spent on design, as well as decreased unit sizes and an overall loss of housing. In addition to new development, we have seen real impacts from the non-conforming upgrade requirements and our efforts to improve and preserve accessible affordable housing. At multiple properties, we have diverted money to non-conforming upgrades that resulted in minimal improvements to residents' homes and community spaces. The proposals put forward in the Housing Regulatory Relief Project would address these challenges and further our work on affordable housing. We also heard tonight that current production rates are extremely low compared to the need of new housing units in the next 20 years, so it's very clear that we need reforms to meet that need. And while we believe at Home Forward that we must have systemic and sociocultural shifts to create a fair and just housing system, the Housing Regulatory Relief Project is a critical set of tools that will improve the availability of housing. Home Forward remains committed to being a local partner to make housing affordable, and we support the Housing Regulatory Relief Project to advance our work and progress the local housing system. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with y'all tonight.
Thank you. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Olissa Starry, Dr. Olissa Starry, Associate Professor at Portland State University. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'd like to start by saying I share everyone's concern about the housing crisis. I do have a few comments about the proposed policy, and I'm going to be wearing a couple of different hats this evening. So first, with my hat on as a member of the Green Roof Information Think Tank, who has shared with you written testimony, I'd like to read a little bit of that testimony. They say to you, in light of the substantial benefits, especially to our community members regarding the eco-roof policy, our community members who are most in need of high-quality, affordable housing, we implore you to reconsider the proposed changes to codes that would eliminate the eco-roof requirement. Instead, we urge you to explore ways to incentivize and promote their use, ensuring a sustainable and resilient future for our city. There's more in the letter that I think you'll enjoy. Now, with my Portland State hat on as faculty, I'm here to acknowledge that none of the reasons that the eco-roof requirement was set for have changed since the requirement was made. The myriad of benefits that the eco-roofs provide to people and wildlife still remain. But I think my role here in front of you today is to emphasize the value that eco-roofs hold as research sites, as sites for innovation, and especially as sites for education. And I have my student Zoe here with you to sort of reinforce the support that we have from the student community for the eco-roof requirement and the support that we have for from future generations. I echo the comments of others that we don't have to pit wildlife against people, but we do have to acknowledge that the wildlife isn't here to stand in front of you today and they can't vote. And I'm here to say that we have found over 50 different beetle species on Portland's eco-roofs. And the only thing that has changed since the eco-roof requirement is that Metro has started looking more closely at how eco-roofs create corridors, and we've instituted climate change policy that's synergistic with the eco-roof requirement. And then, of course, the ecology supports the people as well. So these things work together. And so then finally, with my Olissa Starry hat on, a resident of Portland for nearly 10 years, I just have to say that anyone that pushes the narrative that codes are the only way to make housing more affordable does not understand the nuances of this scenario. These are carefully crafted housing codes that you've heard a lot of people put a lot of effort into. And so it really seems to me, just personally, that the fox is in the hen house here. And I hope that saying that doesn't discount any of my prior testimony with my different hats on. My request to the commission is that you reconsider any code changes that are going to negatively affect Portland's urban ecology. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Danelle Stevens and Nick Kota.
I decided that since I only had 2 minutes, and I might not say everything I needed to say, that I better write it down. And so I made a little poster to say what was important to me. I have lived in Portland 29 years. I own 5 houses in Portland. The oldest one is 1910. The youngest one is 1888. I have converted those homes into duplexes. I have worked with the Planning Commission a day for lots. From 2004 to today, I am currently seeking 2 permits from BDS right now. And BDS is actually a protector. They have a big job. They protect us, the little people, the people on the street, the people that need housing. They protect us from people that don't care whether we can park our bike or not, that don't care if we have birds. Maybe they may not say that, but they think, well, that's too expensive. So BDS is a protector for all the people in Portland, and it's important that we fund them adequately to do their job. And so regulatory relief, the question is for whom? And who made this up? And how much time did it take? It was developers who filled out the survey, not the little people, not the people that are affected by these decisions. I resonate with a woman who said, the design woman who talked about the street view and how people can access those places. That's really important. And why do we have those regulations in the first place? It's bad timing for me to have this all happen now. We are going to have a new government. BDS is going to be under a whole new permit system with this government. This is not good timing when we have a new council that's coming on who will represent more of the people in Portland. And it denies climate emergency that we are under. It's not just climate change, it is an emergency. I think the real problem is BDS does not have enough staff. And I'll give you an example. On my permit for this change, for this 1908 house, to make it in a duplex, just a couple of weeks ago, first of all, it took 88 days. In 2004, I did the same thing, and it took 28 days. And when I did this, they said, it was a pre-issuance. I called up, how's my permit coming? It's that stage. 180 people in the queue. I called a week later. I was number 63, and they can do 15 a day. I think before you make decisions, you need to find out how many permits are coming in and how they're being processed. So I think it's really important that we need evidence.
We will need to move on to the next testifier. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Go ahead, state your name for the record.
Yeah, I'm Nick Coda. I'm the chair of Bike Loud PDX, a group that's looking to empower Portlanders to bike and also create more access for folks biking and throughout Portland. I just want to say for the record that I came today with my own personal testimony. As somebody who personally has lived through the slow boil of Portland rents and can probably speak to why there's not too many folks my age or that are here today. A lot of us are getting priced out, simply put. So I'm excited and truly support the Commission and the city's efforts to reduce barriers to providing affordable and accessible housing in the city. I do believe that what these codes update, they will accomplish and help streamline housing providers' efforts in creating the supply our city really needs in this moment. So my recommendation for you is pretty simple. I know I could probably stake pretty far in the sand as far as what a bike advocate or bike activist probably wants you all to do right now. But it just revolves around one element of the bike parking code. And that is, I asked that the Commission make sure to follow through on the draft bill's recommendation to create a group that can review and analyze parking utilization I've heard testimony already today to talk about kind of stories, but yeah, I'd like to kind of back that up with actual data as much as possible, because this will impact a lot of people and their access to the most affordable form of transportation, which is a bike. A lot of people who are going to be most impacted by this are not people who afford and can afford a vehicle on their own. So the last we need to do right now is recreate barriers we've already removed for people who more or less cannot afford a vehicle and require safe, effective storage for their bikes. So the last point I want to make too is that we are also on the dawn of the Portland Clean Energy Fund with the Climate Investment Plan. Without accessible storage for the thousands of new e-bike dependent Portlanders that we look to have in the next 5 years, our code will simply be out of step with its commitments to reducing climate impacts and providing this access for Portlanders. So thanks for your time, and I look forward to how we can make housing affordable, accessible, while remaining committed to the climate and mode share goals our city has already made.
Thank you for your testimony. Ezra Hammer and David Skolhamer. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
David Scholhammer. I chair the Land Use Committee for the Selwood Moorland Improvement League, better known as SMILE. Permanent elimination of the Neighborhood Contact 3 process would permanently eliminate neighborhood contact meetings for developments between 10 and 25,000 square feet in the design overlay. We oppose eliminating these meetings. Livability benefits such as improved materials, setbacks and landscaping, safer traffic flows, and setting up communication channels to mitigate construction impacts on residents and shop holders have resulted from these meetings. Conversations with developers at these meetings reveal wasteful requirements in the zoning code, such as RV-compatible 12-foot garage heights and a doomed side street retail space. Thus, we support proposed improvements to ground floor height and active use. There would be no significant benefit from suppressing neighborhood contact. It ranked only 16th of the 25 items in the survey of developers. And no cost analysis has been provided showing that neighborhood contact is a significant cost. Instead, we propose that neighborhood contact 2 be required for developments between 10 and 25,000 square feet rather than neighborhood contact 3. We support streamlining of the Neighborhood Contact 2 process, and we oppose suspending neighborhood contact. In addition, instead of suspending required ground floor height standard PR1, just make it optional. We oppose suspending the active use requirement in the Main Street overlay because it would fragment our business district. Instead of suspending articulation requirements, we propose that existing window design standards also satisfy articulation requirements. Please read our written testimony for details. In conclusion, while many of the proposed regulatory changes are temporary, the buildings they would allow are permanent. Changes to zoning code can be reversed. Poorly designed buildings are irreversible.
Thank you for your testimony. Francesca Barini and Leslie Haggard.
Beginning one. I'll put that there. Sorry. Forget it. Hi, I'm Francesca Barini. I'm also a business known as Unusual Cards and a content creator on TikTok. I'm here to talk to you about the housing changes that I think we should not do, because housing zone changes are permanent solutions. Even though you say it's temporary, once you build the thing, how are you going to unbuild it? These proposals will create long-term issues in the name of solving our immediate issues, which are housing, which is very important to me. I would like to see, as an artist in this town, more flexibility with ground use spaces to make a work-live situation for other artists like me. I know a lot of people in our community who are living illegally in commercial spaces or living in RVs outside of commercial spaces. And if we change some of the regulations just so ground use spaces were more easily being able to house people who want to work in the place that they live, that could make all the difference in adding additional units to these developments. Furthermore, I didn't see any new numbers on the cost of bird-safe glass in the overall housing project. And I think if that's a thing that's really impacting the price of a building overall, we should have those numbers to be able to see and compare. Also, birds are, you know the phrase canary in a coal mine. There's a reason we care about birds. They reflect the environment we live in. They create the beautiful place that we call home, which is Portland, Oregon. And I think if we have trouble attracting investment, 30 seconds left. Tax incentives do exist in our downtown area, specifically in the areas that I saw the height requirements. Those are also the opportunity tax zones. If we're not attracting money with giant tax breaks that shield capital gains taxes in the 10-year period, why is getting rid of bike parking, bird safe glass, eco roofs, et cetera, going to make the difference? All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thanks.
It's the button right there in the middle, the gray one. Go ahead and speak into the mic, and we'll see if we can hear you.
Am I there?
Yes. Good.
Okay.
Please state your name for the record.
Yes, Commissioners, my name is Leslie Haggard. I go by Leslie west of the Rockies. I live in a small studio apartment in town. My comments are mostly rhetorical and naive, but maybe they will help. Must the tired old U.S. capitalism continue unrivaled in this century, or might it behave more fairly in meeting our unique problems? Shouldn't there be more give and less take, calling for sacrifice on all sides, not just on the usual people side? Are the invested interests going to share in solving our unique 21st century problems, or just plod on, as usual, unrivaled, maximizing the bottom line as the prime mover? I trust that imagination of this century and possibly beyond has been employed in considering the alternatives and not the old simplistic thinking of bygone years. I would be the last one to stand in the way of expediency and efficiency, but can't we maintain Portland's uniqueness as well as be expedient? Can the stockholders and all those invested, especially those invisible non-participants, ever become empathetic enough to relinquish some share value for the sake of all? Can we build from within our current infrastructure at least as much as without, while not forsaking our green spaces and our hard-won progress? I believe in Portland and the 40 years plus of struggle attempting to keep ahead of the challenges. If that's what keeps Portland weird, I'm all for it. What stands in the way of rapid resolve may not be the regulations, but the inhumane gospel of maximizing profit. Let's see those capitalist champions come forth with as humanitarian investment process as possible. Expediency, yes, but not only for the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Micah Meskel and Tom Lipton. And then I will call once more for Ezra Hammer. Okay. Welcome. Go ahead and say your name for the record.
Oh, I turned it off. Good evening. My name is Micah Meskel, and I'm the Assistant Conservation Director for Portland Audubon. Thank you for having me tonight. So on behalf of our 15,000 members, Portland Audubon greatly supports some of the goals of this effort and adamantly are fighting against the inclusion of bird-safe glazing and the eco-roof requirement and the waiving of those policies. I'm going to review quickly a couple things that we've heard tonight about some of the driving forces that helped inform this policy, which were a flawed survey that was not based in data, and the solutions are not based in data, and the overarching initiative that the governor has been pushing to build more housing. So I'll touch on the data. So we saw in the presentation from staff today that through its lifetime, both the BirdSafe glazing standard and Eco Roofs BirdSafe has seen 0 requests for modifications, and Eco Roofs 5. That's in a 4-year period in the central city, which is the core of where these policies are in place. That's a very limited amount of obstruction or appeared obstruction. And so what are we really solving for? As we talked, we heard some overall observations by Ernesto and by Security Properties, or Hacienda CDC and Security Properties. And I spoke with Ernesto outside afterwards, and I've heard that none of their projects have gone forward, or they've not built a project in the central city, which means that they have not had to deal with either of those codes to date. And there are some really important provisions put in the BirdSafe glazing standards that really help it avoid conflicting with affordable housing, in that there is a 30% glazing requirement for that code to kick in, and that does not match the typical form of an affordable housing project that is trying to maximize units. And so this code is not in conflict, but rather is in conflict for maximizing profit for developers in the central city and South Waterfront. And just to review...
we'll need to move on to the next testifier. Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Oh, he has 19 seconds. Oh, okay. Anyway.
Welcome.
Oh, I got to
State your
get
name
going,
for the record.
right? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Tom Lipton. I'm the guy that discovered Eco Roofs back in 1992. I worked for the Bureau of Environmental Services. I brought that concept, that technology to the attention of the Bureau, and one thing led to another. So in 1996, I put an Eco Roof on my garage. I tested it for 2 years to see if it managed stormwater. It worked great. BES put a Eco Roof on top of the Home Forward building at 12th and Clay in 1999. So the first building in Portland to have an Eco Roof other than my garage was a Home Forward building. BES monitored that roof for 8 years, and it found that it worked much better than my results, my monitoring on my garage, and then put it in, and it became a technique that you could use for stormwater management. The thing that's going to happen here potentially is that by taking, so I don't support getting rid or suspending the Eco Roof requirement. This requirement allows developers to leverage their money relative to different types of things that they have to pay for, such as stormwater management. The best way to manage stormwater is with an Eco Roof. BES allows lesser management approaches because of the basic way that things work. So there's a stormwater planter that some people might say is equivalent, but it's not equivalent. BES has measured all of these things, and the best approach is that. So and it's about 50 to 60% of the cost. The other methods of managing stormwater are 50 to 60% of the cost of the Eco Roof. So if you put an Eco Roof in, you're going to cut that cost, but yes, you do add other costs. I know I'm running out of time, but please don't approve this Eco Roof suspension. They're worth so much, even more than stormwater. Just the ecological benefit. I would suggest making it a requirement that each building have access to the roof, especially for the children, so that they can get up like the Home Forward building at 12th and Clay, and they can get up to the roof and they can have access to the Eco Roof. It's controlled access and safe access, but I think everybody ought to have access, and thank you for
your comments. John Poiolucci. And I believe John is our last in-person testifier, so we will then transition to Kristen Labor and Richard Rusnak. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is John Palucci. I'm an architect here in Portland and a small firm owner. And I just wanted to lead off by saying I'm heartened by the conversations and urgency around housing. It's obviously a crisis, and I feel for the city of Portland with that. And so getting into some of the points talked about tonight, by and large, I think I agree with the majority of the testimonies in saying that, I think we need to keep Eco Roofs. I think it's the economies of it doesn't match up to say, no, we shouldn't do that as a short-term solution. The same goes for BirdSafe glass, and the same goes for neighborhood contact. Something I would consider would be bike parking. It can be a cost, it can be a space, a space impact on residential development. So something that we can look to in like the building code is plumbing counts, for example. I think it'd be worth considering if a developer can come up with data to say we need less bike parking, or in some cases, maybe the requirements aren't enough, they need more bike parking. I think they should be able to present that in their reviews of their projects. I also just wanted to quickly touch on residential infill. I really commend our community with introducing these into law, but I think we can go further. I think it's a great opportunity to incorporate housing more in like the single dwelling zones, and I think some of the places we can do that successfully and increase density for housing while maintaining the ecology that we have in the city. A great place to do that would be looking at slightly increasing the height limits of ADUs, for example, or any kind of housing that's in the info program, and embracing verticality and possibly building on top of existing structures that keeps us from excavation, releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And also verticality allows for more opportunities to work with existing trees and ecology existing on sites. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kristen Leiber.
Good evening. I am Kristen Leiber, Executive Director of the Lloyd Eco District. Our mission is to make Lloyd one of North America's most sustainable urban communities. And like many of you today, we balance community need with environmental responsibility. Two truths can be held simultaneously. We are in a climate emergency and we need roofs over our heads today. So I do understand and support some of these compromises, relaxing ground floor height requirements, streamlining neighborhood outreach, small adjustments in bike parking. But my concerns do echo many of the ones we've heard today. I have three primary appeals to the Commission and staff. Firstly, let's treat this adjustment period as a temporary pause on some of our progressive standards, not an abandonment. Let's clarify that this is an expedition of housing, not a reversal of climate progress. After the 5-year waiver, I believe many of these requirements must come due to stay on track for our climate adaptation requirements. Secondly, what if we incentivize developers to embrace the current regulations? Imagine granting expedited permits to fast-track developers who maintain these best practices. For developers, speed to market is a consideration as strong as rates of return. So I ask you to consider both carrots and sticks. Finally, allow me to share my perspective as someone embedded in a full spectrum of a single neighborhood, of a single neighborhood every day. Lloyd is a certified eco district, and we're a central city neighborhood slated for so much development in forthcoming years. The next 5 are so vital for us. We already have excellent momentum on sustainable development, and we want this to continue as part of our cultural identity. Lloyd can and should absorb much more housing, but I'm concerned we may swap 5 years for 50 years of a densely built environment that just doesn't serve us. I ask you to consider the consequences for specific neighborhood contexts. Let's not undo the environmental justice we're working so hard to build. A full consideration of community is critical for building a neighborhood with longevity. Please consider policy creating holistic neighborhood health in 5 years and in 50. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Richard Rusnak. Okay, moving on to Heather Flint Chato. All right, Surya Joshi.
Hi everyone. My name is Surya Joshi. I'm here at a capacity of a PhD student at School of Tool and School of Urban Studies at PSU, and I also work at ERCO, which provides services for immigrants and refugee community. So I'm coming at my own capacity, not as a ERCO worker or a PhD student. One thing that I saw in the proposed regulation was removal of bird-safe glazing and removal of eco-roof requirement. I work with immigrants and refugees all the time who have families and children, and then having environmental protection not only allows people to live in a healthier environment, but also it provides opportunity for children, especially children of like a lot of refugee community members who have been displaced from their environment, home country where they lived, in kind of harmony with nature. And these changes seems to be temporary, but their impact will remain permanent. And I think people like before me spoke about the incident back in Chicago just a few weeks ago. And while we all know that those memories are very fresh with us, it seems like a hurried decision to take these very important and well thought after rules from housing policies, and it might help developers a little bit to save from here and there, but on a long run, that will not help environment, that will not help community. In fact, we can collaborate with other agency like PSEF in order to mitigate some of these costs, and then make sure that people will have housing as well as their environment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Kelly Lanspa? Roger Watkins? Stephanie Condor? Okay, Kimberly Horner? Stephanie is on. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Good evening. I'm Steph Condor, Senior Vice President of Development at Related Northwest. I've been working in housing for 15 years. I'm a native Oregonian. I'm currently a commissioner for the Portland Housing Advisory Commission. I sit on PSU's Real Estate Board and am a committee member on the Inclusionary Housing Stakeholder Work Group Committee. Related Northwest over the last 5 years has been very active in developing affordable housing in the Portland metro area. We have over 1,200 units either completed or construction and design. I've experienced the impacts of code and policies that are diminishing the delivery of housing. And in my opinion, the recommendations before you are largely fair, balanced, and our steps are necessary to get housing production back online. I appreciate everyone's testimony here and their perspectives. I do, however, feel that our housing and homelessness crisis has been ongoing. It's a desperate problem, and so we need to prioritize housing our people. Market rate housing in the Portland area is all but stopped. I'm getting calls weekly from market rate developers that are selling their permitted projects as they can't make the deals work under current conditions and policy. Housing at every level of income is vitally important, as a lack in one tier of housing will create bottlenecks and scarcity ultimately in the housing continuum. I believe we have conditions that exist now that are creating bottlenecks that are going to be felt for years to come for all households. Housing faces many barriers that prevent or diminish production. Alleviating some of these burdens through the Housing and Regulatory Relief Project will facilitate more flexibility to bring projects to fruition, efficiently saving finite resources and delivering a greater number of housing units. Specifically, provisions around bike parking, loading zones, and design review are very important provisions that will impact affordable housing and market rate housing alike. I want to be clear, though, that the body of these recommendations will provide impact to housing production on a whole, and I'll share only a few items that I've personally experienced to give you some context. So, I'm developing these affordable housing projects. The voluminous space for bike parking often sits vacant. It's prime space that we could be either doing housing or community benefit space. They're very costly spaces. They impact the project in a way that hinders and not enhances the community, and it wastes our limited funds for low-income housing. Design review. Oftentimes I seek sites that are outside of design overlay simply to avoid design review, because design review adds minimally 2 months of time on development on a project. It increases risks, reduces certainty, and, affordable housing has very little tolerance for these types of unknowns. This, in an environment like we have seen over the last year and a half, rising interest rates, like what, 10 times, cost escalations of 1 to 2% a month. These 2 months are very impactful. That could be, I know Jill Chin earlier said maybe not $1 million. I'm saying $1 million at least. And so, really looking at that design review provision is really important. It should be noted that jurisdictions like Seattle has already made the move to eliminate design review for affordable housing projects, and they recognize that these projects need all the help they can get to get off the ground. I really appreciate your consideration and time in this matter. In a time where we're seeing significant levels of houselessness, these code changes could make significant progress in addressing the deep needs in our community. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Kimberly Honer. Okay. Paul Buchanan.
Yes.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. My name is Paul Buchanan. I'm a former board member of Bike Loud, a current board member of the Street Trust, and I actually have the rare distinction of being a bike parking professional. Every day I work with Portland code, as well as code in cities from Los Angeles to Bellingham and to Astoria, in the design and implementation of bike rooms. Reducing the ratio of bike parking spaces is the last thing the city should do to this portion of the code. Keeping sight on Portland's mode share and climate goals, making sure that every Portlander has a safe, secure space to park their bicycle for some of their trips ensures we can meet the city's 25% of trips by bike goal. This is essential to mode share stability. But there are a number of code aspects that can be cut in order to make bike parking more affordable to build while maintaining functionality, reduce friction in the review process, as well as make sure Portland stays world-renowned for our bike parking spaces. Removing the alcove requirement entirely, the 50% in unit for buildings 20 units or less, as well as the 15-foot rule will eliminate over 75% of conflicts with the bike parking code. In building development, space is what drives costs. Portland is one of the only cities with very strict on-center space and aisle requirements for high-density bike parking. In other cities, to fit as many bikes in a space as functionally as possible, they can be installed as close as 15 inches on center for 2-tier racks, or as close as 13 inches for vertical. Portland requires each at 17 inches. Further, the current code calls for an 8-foot aisle behind the 2-tier racks and 5-foot aisle behind vertical racks. 8 foot is twice the minimum suggested by manufacturers, and 5 feet is 2 feet further aisle than required in other cities. This impacts bike parking spaces by 30 to 50%. Removing or reducing the cargo bike size requirement will save more space. And this is in some of the diagrams that Victor sent along with the street trust.
Thank you very much. We will need to move on to the next testifier.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Morris. Okay, Ted Labby.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. My name is Ted Labby. I live in Portland, longtime Portlander. I work as co-director of DPAVE here in Portland. We reclaim pavement to create pocket green spaces at churches, schools, and other community hubs to combat the climate crisis, often in low access to greens to nature corners of our city. First off, let me say I also oppose rollbacks, the eco roof and bird safe window requirements. And I support the call by Portland Neighbors Welcome for four floors and corner stores from East 12th to 60th Avenue. I'd actually like to connect these two things. I'd like to see Portland not roll back eco roofs, but move forward with eco roofs, moving them out of the central city, out into the commercial corridors, out into this area that Portland Neighbors Welcome would like to see four stories. I think we can deliver more nature and provide more housing at the same time and do that sustainably. But actually, I'm here not to talk about that. I'm here to talk about conditional use reviews, which has been something that has burdening my organization for some time. I don't know if many of you have seen, there's a current issue of Street Roots out that profiles one site up in Cully, Morningstar Church, where we are being burdened with a type 2 conditional use review. I would encourage you to look at ways we can reduce the impact of these conditional use reviews across the city. Many people in Portland know that, and I'd reference my letter as a way to how we might go about that. Many people in Portland understand Portland has taken a leadership role in rolling back minimum parking requirements. What they don't know is that literally hundreds of sites across our city, mostly churches and schools, are burdened with conditional use reviews where you can remove certain numbers, you can remove up to 4% of the parking spaces or go through a conditional use review. So if you're gonna remove more than some tiny amount of parking, you're put through this very cumbersome, very expensive, time-consuming process. And I would like to ask that you consider ways in which we can modify that.
Thank you. We do need to move on to the next testifier. Thank you for your
behind
comments.
the crisis, I'll just add 1 second, is a childcare crisis, and it's impacting Portland's ability to locate accessible, affordable childcare facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marianne Fitzgerald.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Marianne Fitzgerald, and I'm asking the Planning Commission to not accept the proposal to suspend all of these codes. The only goal that I saw on the project is to help increase housing. Maybe more residential units will be built, but there is no guarantee that these developments will be affordable. I did not see any evaluation of costs and benefits in this proposal. Tonight was the first time I saw these numbers. It appears that all the benefits will go to the developers and all the burdens will be borne by the residents in Portland for decades to come. People, planet, and profits are not mutually exclusive. BPS needs to develop more integrated solutions to our housing and climate crises. I submitted a letter and I have 6 specific comments. I'll summarize quickly. Number 1, do not roll back the neighborhood contact requirements and do not roll back design review procedure types. These proposals leave city staff in charge of development reviews and cut neighborhoods and neighbors out of the process. In reality, the conversations between the developers and the neighbors can benefit everyone involved, and the current requirements hold the city accountable to enforce. I'm also asking you not to roll back bike parking requirements, eco roofs, and bird safe blazing standards for many reasons already stated. I'm also asking you not to roll back the on-street parking impact requirements. Parking is a hot button in my neighborhood. We have busy streets with no shoulders, no sidewalks, no bike paths, and no access to transit. Developers really need to consider how people can travel safely in the neighborhoods or no one's going to want to live there. Finally, do not roll back ground floor active use requirements. The idea is to provide more services closer to where people live, including what I just heard, childcare. If this space is converted to residential use, then please prioritize ADA accessible units so that people with mobility issues are not stranded on upper floors like we read about earlier this month.
Thank you. We do need to move on to the next testifier.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Sarah Schubert.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Schubert, and I'm the Northwest Director of Development at Community Development Partners. And Community Development Partners is a mission-focused, for-profit, affordable housing developer based in Portland. We also have an office in California. Company-wide, we've developed over 2,200 units of affordable housing, and we currently have over 900 affordable units under construction in Oregon, with 500 units in our pre-development pipeline. All of our development is based on our core value that everyone deserves a home and that thoughtfully designed affordable housing communities can be catalysts for a community. I'm here to express our strong support for the Housing Regulatory Relief Project. Given the acute need for all housing, but especially housing for the most vulnerable, we support any relief from the requirements that can make the development of affordable housing more costly. While there are many headwinds faced by our industry, including escalating construction costs, interest rates, insurance increase, and more, the city has the ability to make a difference in spurring the construction of affordable housing by reducing one barrier by providing regulatory relief through HRRP. While we support all the proposed changes, I want to address several components that we're particularly excited about. Bike parking has been a constant constraint for affordable housing developers. Our bike rooms often sit vacant and take up valuable space. The in-unit bike racks also cost money and take valuable space in the units. We're at a point where we're stretching every dollar to make our projects pencil, and the relaxation of bike parking standards will certainly help us. By the same measure, waiving ground floor active use requirements will be a huge help to affordable housing projects. Jill talked about this when she spoke. Some obviously active uses trigger prevailing wages, which make affordable housing projects more expensive. Even if the use doesn't trigger prevailing wages, requirements can limit our flexibility to develop the right project for the neighborhood with amenities that our residents can use. Thanks for your time, and we wholeheartedly endorse the efforts of the city to encourage the production of more housing and appreciate the efforts of the staff and the commissioners to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Doug Burgess?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to testify, Chair O'Meara and the Planning Commission. My name is Doug Burgess. I serve as executive director, or I serve on the executive committee of Oregon Smart Growth. I'm also a senior director of development at Greystar. I live and work in Portland and cover multifamily housing in and around the metro. I strongly urge the Planning Commission to support the proposed draft of the housing regulatory relief project. It's critical to our shared housing production goals. We also appreciate the city's current focus on housing production and addressing supply and affordability locally and statewide. The number of units that have been developed in Portland between 2017 and 2022 has dropped from 8,335 units to 1,639. That's an 80% decrease in just 5 years. And while we all know there's market-driven factors, and that's led to some of that deterioration, there are barriers that are in front of us that we can control ourselves. I can speak about a project I'm working on. I've got a 381-unit multifamily project in the Pearl. It's entitled and has a foundation permit. It can't be financed in today's environment. A little bit of budget relief would go a long way in helping it get financed. This project has 31 units of affordable housing at 60% AMI. It's got 5 3-bedroom units that are family-sized units. And we calculate that when you consider the bike parking, the eco roofs, and the bird-safe glass, our rent would have to increase to cover the cost. A lot of people said earlier, well, the developers are the only one that benefit. Well, the renters are going to have to bear the cost for those. And we equate about $1,015 of rent per year or 75 units per month. So that's a considerable amount in these challenging economic times. And that's why we fully support this in this crisis. So with particular emphasis on eco roofs and bird safe glass, that's about $1.5 million in costs, or $4,000 a unit. And that contributes significantly to that rent burden. So we appreciate the time, and we strongly encourage you to consider supporting this proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Up next, we have Susan Harris.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hi, my name is Susan Harris, and I live in North Portland, and I work downtown. I'm here to oppose the proposal to suspend green roof and bird safe building requirements. Smart building design and code requirements can help both birds and people now and into the future. Birds are struggling with navigating a world lit at night, buildings with large windows, and extreme weather. Portland's bird-safe glazing requirements help reduce window collisions, one of the biggest causes of bird deaths in North America. Bird-friendly design strategies also overlap with strategies to increase energy efficiency in buildings. Please abandon the proposal to suspend green roof and bird-friendly building requirements, and please continue to move forward with new environmental initiatives such as protecting floodplains and reducing light pollution. We want sustainable, resilient, affordable green communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Gus Baum.
Hi, thank you. My name is Gus Baum. I'm the Director of Development for Security Properties. I'm also a policy member of the Oregon Smart Growth Group. And I'm calling in today in support of the Housing Regulatory Relief Project. I want to talk specifically about what we do here at Security Properties. We're one of the largest multifamily infill project developers in the Northwest. Currently under construction, we have 570 units under construction in two major projects, one in the Goose Hollow neighborhood and another in the former Pepsi distribution site, Sandy. Together, the bike parking requirements total approximately 15,000 square feet of space that we have to do in stored underground spaces. That's roughly 770 bike stalls, far in excess of what will be used by any current or future resident of these facilities. I appreciate, as a 40-year bike commuter myself and a longtime Portlander, I think the bike infrastructure in Portland is second to none in the United States. And I think that many of the policies and procedures that have come before this change have done a great deal to encourage bike commuting. However, the storage requirements makes a real impact on our projects. I've calculated out that it is approximately $2 million of additional capital that it takes in these two projects to create that much bike storage, the equivalent of approximately 5 to 6 units of additional housing. Thank you again for your consideration, and I strongly support the approval of the project.
Thank you. Damon Tarlow.
Hi there. A lot of information, a lot of opinion, so thank everyone here for their time. My name is Damon Tarlow. I'm a principal at Tremble Crow Company. I'm also a fourth-generation Portlander. The company I work for is the largest developer in the country. We're a subsidiary of the largest real estate firm in the world. I say that because I think all of these things are a balance. Some of the regulatory environment is overly prescriptive, complicated to implement. I thought I might use a specific example of one of our projects in the city of Portland to illustrate this. It has the potential to deliver 800 units. It's on 5 city blocks. We've been working on it for over 3 years already. So there's no rush in any of these processes. In our opinion, these all take a while to implement. We spent 2 years alone working with PBOT just to establish and agree upon vehicular access points on the property. There are many different street classifications. There are one-way streets. There are dead-end streets. There is a super block involved. So it is a very complicated design to piece together. We've hired all the best local architects and engineers to figure it out. I commend the staff and all the stakeholders. These proposals that we support are thoughtful. They're practical proposals. The ground floor use modifications in particular specifically allow some flexibility, some creativity to basically get the kit of parts and the puzzle pieces together on a big, complex site. We are in favor of and not in conflict of the ground use rules. We need to make place. We want to have a compelling experience. These are in the best interest of the projects, the community, the investors. And I'll just end by saying that optics matter. And I think the solutions-oriented approach to this whole process reads well for the city of Portland. Most of the investors that finance these large projects are interested in the Sun Belt in particular and are challenged by the environment in Portland. And the process here has been, I think, a good example that we can get things done, and that's what they expect, and that's what they command to invest in our community. So thank you for the time, and I encourage the support of this.
Thank you. Up next, we have Jameson Luce.
Hi there, Jameson Luce. I'm a director of development with Ethos, which is a boutique developer in Northeast Portland. We work on a number of projects from co-living projects that have 50 to 60% AMI incorporated to kind of larger 150 unit and above projects like our Brooklyn project in Southeast Portland. I'm also a board member on Oregon Smart Growth, and just wanted to really underscore the importance of the changes for that are being considered for this, particularly around the ground floor activation. I went to Portland's Masters in Real Estate program and totally ascribed to a lot of the urbanist principles that have been brought up around retail and active kind of building ground floor areas. But I would also like to point out just the way that a lot of the ground floor retail is actually vacant in this city. If you go in the North Pearl, a lot of those spaces are dark spaces that are vacant. The last company that I worked with actually had a ton of vacant retail space that had to be converted into residential later on. And so I just think the theory of it is really in the right place and coming kind of in line with a lot of urbanist principles. But in practice, we actually have an oversupply of retail. I don't know why we would hold so strongly to something that's not necessarily working out in practice. So just want to underscore, I appreciate this group's focus on trying to figure out how to produce more housing. I think the changes that are being proposed are in line with that, and I'm in full support of making those proposed changes. So thank you.
Thank you. Allison Reynolds.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Allison Reynolds. I'm a land use attorney with Stoll Reeves, where I work on a lot of large housing projects. And I'm also here as a board member with Oregon Smart Growth, and I chair the Public Affairs Committee for NAOP's Oregon chapter. And so I echo the comments of my Oregon Smart Growth colleagues that you just heard from and our written testimony in support of this proposal. So as a land use attorney, I do a lot of work on the front end of projects, and I want to talk to you specifically about the neighborhood contact changes that are proposed. We heard early on from some other testifiers that it is not costly or difficult to meet with project neighbors. And I and most of the clients I work with agree with that conceptually. Most projects I work on hold meetings with project neighbors, and we're doing this long before these neighborhood contact rules took effect in 2018. The neighborhood contact process mandated by our code, however, is not simple and is costly because it is very time consuming and it is additive to the permitting process. It takes a minimum of 8 weeks to complete the Tier 3 version of neighborhood contact with all of the different mandatory steps and timeframes. And a project must complete neighborhood contact before it can file an application for a land use review. The city sets this requirement very early in the process because the public already has significant opportunities to weigh in during the land use process. In our experience, the neighborhood contact requirements also aren't particularly effective for many projects. Not a lot of folks come to the neighborhood meetings with the developer, and in many cases, because the neighborhood contact meeting is required to take place so early in the process, the meeting ends up being 6 to 12 or more months before the public hearings, and most of our projects will change quite a lot between the meeting and when the land use hearing actually happens. So I strongly support removing the Tier 3 neighborhood contact process entirely. I agree with staff that it adds time and complication to projects without providing meaningfully better results than the Tier 2 process. And I also agree with staff that eliminating neighborhood contact in the short term will make it easier and more affordable to build housing, while still preserving the many options that the public has to weigh in a meaningful way on our projects in Portland.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Patrick Henry. Okay. Michael Nagy.
Yes, hello. Good evening. This is Michael Nagy speaking. I'm the managing director for Wood Partners in Portland. I'm also the vice president of the board of Oregon Smart Growth. I wanted to speak in support of these proposed changes to the regulatory framework around development in Portland. We as a city have created a number of barriers around housing production over the years, a lot of them well-intentioned. But unfortunately, the cumulative effect of those barriers has led to a slowdown in housing production that is clear to see in the data and where we're at with permit land use applications today. All of these proposed changes most all of these proposed changes have a cost impact on the production of housing. We know that cost is the largest barrier to housing production we have right now as a city. I think it's a great opportunity for us to really put our residents and our population ahead and to support the people of Portland by making some changes that's going to allow us to increase housing production, which will benefit all Portland's residents. So, I think we really applaud the work of BAE and the approach by the city to take a hard look at what has caused Portland to have high housing costs relative to its income. And I think these are the exact type of things that we can do as a city to address that. No further comments from me. Thank you for the time tonight.
Thank you very much. And I believe that is the last testifier. So thank you all who have provided written and oral testimony. We will now close the oral and written record for the Housing Regulatory Relief Project. I'm calling staff back up, please. And we will do a round robin for commissioners who have questions, concerns, and I do have a request from Commissioner Spivak, who has stepped away but sent me his question regarding the schedule for the vote on this item. If we could just quickly have an update or look ahead for that, because I think Commissioner Spivak is expressing some concern around the amount of testimony and how much time we'll have to actually deliberate and consider.
Sure.
Before the vote.
I can cover that. Thank you very much. Sandra Wood, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. What we had discussed was that the Planning Commission would hear all the testimony today. So thank you for listening to all that, and thank you to all the testifiers. That we would close the written record today, and that we, or you, commissioners, would let us know if you had questions or things you wanted to discuss or potential amendments by November 1st, which is a week from tomorrow. And the reason we picked November 1st is because we have an officers briefing on November 2nd where we can prepare for the next meeting, which is November 14th. So if we hear from you by November 1st, on November 2nd, we can prepare the officers, and then we can work with you individually if you have code ideas or amendment ideas, and we can work with you and get your packet together and publish it by November 9th in preparation for your next meeting on November 14th. And hopefully you'll move amendments at that time and take a vote on the whole package. That'll give us enough time to get to City Council. We're tentatively scheduled there for towards the end of December. The request from Council was that we bring a package forward in December, and we're penciled in right now for December 20th.
Okay, and again, relaying the words of Commissioner Spivak, who provided me with his comments, he is requesting that another meeting be added to our schedule so we can honor the public input we've received with the deliberation it deserves. So I think I would like to hear from other commissioners. I know there will be amendments. And so for those of you that have amendments that you would like to propose, could we just have a quick check-in regarding the proposed schedule and whether that you feel that gives you enough time for proposing your amendments by the requested date of November 1st? Go ahead, Vice Chair Thompson.
Hi, thank you. I also echo Eli's concern about the timeline and the speed, and think that this process would greatly benefit from having an additional meeting where commissioners can more thoroughly debrief and discuss the potential amendments, have time to digest all of the testimony that we heard tonight. I know that probably puts staff in a very difficult situation. I don't know what to do about that, but one of the themes that really struck me hearing the testimony was just the amount of expertise and in-depth effort and intention that went into developing these codes. And I feel like when we think about our amendment process or whether or not we move to adopt them as is, I feel like we need to have a little bit of a better understanding of some of the implications. I think about things where we've gotten, or programs where we've had maybe similar amounts of public testimony like RIP, and we went like way into the weeds on that. So all the commissioners understood like exactly how the 6-unit configuration worked. And we just haven't gotten there when we're talking about ground floors and active uses. And I think that that we need to dive in a little bit more.
Thank you, Vice Chair Thompson. Okay, I'm seeing agreement from commissioners. Can we have just a quick sense of feasibility on that request? And do we need to go to a vote in order to add?
Can I, Patricia Deacon, for the record, can I just make a couple of statements? I mean, I think I understand these sentiments, but I think we went straight to this idea of do we need more time rather than talking about what the potential items are, issues are that are on the table. And I think that's a little bit unfortunate. So I'm hoping that maybe we could reframe a little bit and start out by talking about what are the things that people are concerned about. And let's see what we can do about those things. The other thing I would like to just kind of point out to the commission is that the whole intent of this process was that because these are temporary, this is supposed to be a quick process. The kind of analysis and the in-depth vetting of everything that we would do normally, this process was just not that process. And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge the fact that the purpose of this project was to try to do something quickly and in a timely fashion, and to try to make a difference as immediately as possible, with the understanding that there are a lot of things that we could study and test and learn from through this process, and look to, we've been immediately talking about, what are some things that we can do to study these provisions for permanent changes down the line. So we are not closing the door on exploring other ways of handling some of these topics, but we do need to do something more quickly in the meantime. So I'll give an example of what I mean by that. The ground floor uses, I think all the ground floor provisions that we've been talking about, as staff, we've been talking about going into greater depth and looking more at each street that's in these, that's in these areas of that require these requirements, and seeing if we can be a little bit more refined about that, how we can refine those locations so that we can still require those things and be a little bit more discriminating about where they apply. So I just really want the commission to kind of understand and consider that this is not the final stop for a lot of these things. We have been instructed to try to do something quickly, and it is the intention of staff to continue to work on these issues.
Thank you, Patricia, and definitely hear those concerns and appreciate the work and schedule that staff has set up to really try to expedite this relief package. With that, I think my question back is there any flexibility regarding the proposed amendments that staff would like to see by November 1st to give commissioners additional time to formulate those amendments and ask any clarifying questions back to staff?
So, do you want to?
Oh no, I was thinking, is that a question to us? I think where Patricia was going with this is maybe the right approach of like, what are the questions that are out there? And I just wanted to reiterate, when we started scoping this project before and we were asked to do something quickly, that's why we landed on the temporary changes. We absolutely know that these projects and these policies were long-standing conversations with the community. Phil and I have shepherded many of them through, as you know. And that's why the whole proposal, and that's why I keep coming back to what the proposal is. It's for a 5-year temporary hold on these policies for this moment in time that we're in. So maybe we can come back to that question when we get a better idea for what are the
Sure.
potential amendments.
I do see Commissioner Spivak, you have rejoined. Go ahead and again with let's keep the staff request regarding expressing questions, concerns, or potential items for amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm calling in from the Grant High School cheerleading competition. The question I have is whether the City Council can get value from our commission if we do not have a time to deliberate amongst ourselves before we propose amendments. And my concern is that we just heard so much testimony, heartfelt, that the City Council will not get value from our participation in it if we have to go from right now to making amendments without having a chance to talk among ourselves at all. So that's my concern. So I appreciate the need for urgency on this. I think we could do it with one additional meeting. I don't think it's a big extension, but I think that I personally don't feel comfortable proposing amendments without having talked to my fellow commissioners. And generally on projects, we do have a chance to do that. I think this should be one of those. Thanks.
Okay, additional commissioner comments, questions?
If I might,
Go ahead.
Mike Alexander for the record. I would support that as well. Now, again, there's a depth of complexity here that I think I will leave here with a tremendous appreciation for on both sides of this. And I appreciate the detail that has been brought to this. What I think is that I really would like to have the opportunity to sort of have that discussed within commission. And if pushed to the point of do something quickly versus do something that I could comfortably stand behind, it's going to be the latter. I'm not there, quite frankly. And that is not a criticism of any part of this, but I'm feeling that there's probably a greater degree of understanding and comfort and history in some places here, but I'm not at that point right now. And I just can't, put myself in a position where I'm advocating for something that I don't understand as clearly and as deeply as I need to.
Go ahead, Commissioner Routh.
I hear on like what is a preview of coming attractions of what are people thinking, and I'm also I'm kind of remembering how long we deliberated on DOZA, for example, and it's like this feels like DOZA condensed. There's a lot, that involves review, that involves, some specific like what are standards versus review. So I'm still kind of awash in that. I really want to appreciate how like that staff this is going to take a few minutes. Sorry. Feel free to settle in, team. Staff, you have worked, like Sandra and Phil and everyone have worked so hard on each of these over years. And so I can't imagine how difficult it is also for you to bring these before us to say, maybe we can suspend these. So I really want to appreciate that the difficulty for y'all knowing the value of this and knowing the depth of community involvement that has gone into each of these. This is hard. This is, I think, in some ways we are in a housing emergency. As others have said, it is also a climate emergency. And part of that, as someone who has been the former executive director of Oregon Walks, and we have all had conversations around community safety, eyes on the street and first floor is a deeply held, important consideration. So what are the potential downside impacts? I hear that this is a suspension for 5 years. I also know that we are looking to ramp up housing production and trying to get that in the ground as quickly as possible because we are in a housing emergency. So I echo, I believe Bob Salinger mentioned this. What are the, how much this is potentially a lot of housing projects that we're talking about. So what could that potentially be in terms of how this impacts the fabric of our neighborhoods and Central. I mentioned the 1942, and I'm just so glad the Historic Landmarks Commission mentioned the 1942 War Housing Code, because that was created right when we were trying to get a whole bunch of housing in the ground because there were so many workers coming in around the Kaiser shipyards, right? So a lot of that housing still exists. So it is an interesting question, what did that suspension, what happened, what was suspended, how did that work out? I think that's a really interesting conversation to have. But a lot of these, as I mentioned, go into the marrow of who we are. Bird glazing, I think we've heard very clearly, there might be a cost of bird glazing. The cost to bird mortality is huge to me. I'll just say that would be, I can't imagine supporting that. I also heard from Phil that while there is the cost of eco roofs, that might also just be the cost of stormwater, which is what we are not willing to give up. And so so can we hold eco roofs basically harmless, because that is it all comes out in the wash. I was really fascinated Unusual Cards. I follow you on TikTok. Thank you. On work live spaces, I would be fascinated to hear more about that. That seems to span the issue of eyes on the street and residential uses. We have some, I think, precedents of that. The Everett Street lofts being one. We have milepost 5 on 82nd Avenue. So, are there? What can we learn from that? What can we consider in terms of code as a way of creatively managing some of those needs with residential and commercial? And sorry, then I'll stop. But floor to ceiling height would be a really difficult thing because that removes the possibility of retrofitting or reallocating that for commercial space if we wanted to do so later. I think, and then finally, bike parking. Oh, I'm really appreciative of Bike Loud, Portland Neighbors Welcome, and the Street Trust, all like trying to think of how can we achieve some of our the goals of bike parking without without sacrificing what we know we need. And I appreciated, I think it was Nick Cota who brought in the importance of PSET, like how PSEF is just coming online with transportation decarbonization, how we're looking at e-bike rebates, and that cargo bikes are that we talk about affordable housing, but one in four people, Oregonians, do not or cannot drive. And so that is 25% of our population easily. So how are we accommodating that? And especially since we just removed parking minimum standards. Okay, I will stop now. That was a lot. I have more, but that's kind of where I'm at. Preview of coming attractions. Patricia, that was my answer.
Thank you, Commissioner Routh. Commissioner Lang, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for everybody's time and commitment to this. This is complicated. I spent all day reading testimony, and the complexity for me, I was one of the founding members of the Lloyd Eco District and served on their board for a number of years. I was also one of the founding members of Oregon Smart Growth and served on their board for a number of years. It's really complex. I would really appreciate a little bit of time to talk to the other commissioners a little more about what we learned today, because what I learned in the testimony was that there's some nuance to this that we really need to pay attention to, and it isn't all of one or all of the other. And I think there's some things we can work through that we can offer the city council that may be more acceptable. But I'd appreciate the opportunity to talk with my fellow commissioners about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lang. I will have several amendments, and the neighborhood notice is top of my list. I want to give it a little bit more time, but I do not support the elimination of neighborhood notice across the board. I think at a minimum, a site posting with development contact is a very sort of low threshold way to let neighbors know that there is development coming. Again, potentially some nuance to that, but that is top of my list. I do not support the elimination of the eco roof or the bird friendly glazing. And as an affordable housing developer, absolutely appreciate the housing crisis, but I do not see those two items as rising to priority to really move the needle in any meaningful way in this conversation. In terms of the ground floor, I understand the cost and burden that adds to affordable housing developers, but I also champion walkable, eyes on the street, safe communities. So again, an amendment will be forthcoming from me, and there may be a consideration that I would propose specifically for regulated affordable housing to see that relief. And so again, that would need some nuance around how do we define that, right? Because again, I do see that one as a cost driver that can that can provide a barrier for affordable housing development. Those were really my main items, and I do hear a pretty broad consensus for more time. One potential I have to throw out is, could we use our chairs meeting, right? Because that would not throw us off schedule, but could we open that up to the commission? Is that an option?
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorfer, I was actually going to suggest, would this commission be open to having an extra meeting, quite frankly, whatever time frame it's in, but if it's, if we have all the commissioners, it's a public meeting, we have to notice it. So it can't just be done informally. But I think that this is urgent enough, and the urgency of it, necessitates that potentially we schedule another meeting.
Okay, I think that's the option that hopefully meets everyone's request for additional time, and understand that we'll need to work with staff to be flexible and get that scheduled, in a pretty short time frame.
Yeah, why don't we go back and discuss options and maybe check in with our council offices too, and then bring back, or probably through email, what the options are, but we hear you all loud and clear. I still think it would be helpful, kind of like Commissioner Mara shared, and I think you all have ideas in your head right now and are just trying to absorb so much of the information that you got. If we stick to, by next Wednesday, if you could just let us know what topics, are we talking about loading standards? Are we going to need to devote time to nonconforming upgrades? Because there was some testimony about, I think, many of the topics that you didn't hear about orally today that give you a little more time to read also. So if we could just at least have the topics by next Wednesday, and we'll commit to probably by the end of this week coming up with options to give the commission more time to discuss.
Thank you. And I do see Vice Chair Thompson, and then just letting Commission know we do have one more item on the agenda. And I know staff is here ready to present, and we are looking for a recommendation and vote on that. Go ahead, Vice Chair Thompson.
I'm good then. I think we can share ideas like Sandra just said. I was just going to suggest that we do that so commissioners could understand what ideas other commissioners had and be as efficient as possible for our next meeting as far as crafting amendments.
Great. And just to reiterate, if you could send those to me and to Julie, then you have our emails, obviously, and we'll put them together and start developing a plan. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go ahead and move to our next item, which is the housing needs analysis. And again, for the commission, we have staff coming back, Tom Armstrong, Ariel Kane, and Sam Brookham, with this is our final discussion. So I know there's been some updates to the executive summary based on our requests. And so we'll have, I imagine, a quick update from staff, and then we do want to move on to a recommendation to move this item to City Council.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. Yeah, I believe staff just has a few slides primarily with the actions that we are asking you to take this evening. And then to work with you to formulate your recommendation letter, your transmittal letter to council.
My computer chose the time to restart here to get everything going, but yes, Tom Armstrong with BPS. Yeah, we just wanted to queue up. Really, there is sort of 3 items before you this evening. One is to, I guess, have a motion to amend the housing needs analysis report to adopt the changes to the executive summary. The second would be to repeal and adopt the new reports for the housing needs analysis and the residential buildable land inventory. And then the third is, again, another discussion about the kinds of issues you'd like to see in the transmittal letter. So let me just, can use that as a guide. Let me log into the Zoom meeting here.
Great. And as you're doing that, Tom, I did have a question just on process because I had just one question on the executive summary. So is there still time to request edit or clarification on that as long as we make that part of our recommendation?
Yes, commissioners, if we can just make those edits right here, if you could just let us know what they are, we can do that, and that would be fine.
Sure. Would you like to know now, or wait for
I
your?
think
It's getting started.
Up to you all.
Okay. Well, I'll just throw out my question, and you can let me know if you have the data or not. But this is regarding the catch-up units from the underproduction of for households experiencing homelessness. That we need to build 55,000 units specifically for that group of folks by 2032. So roughly 6,000 units per year. Do we have an AMI? Is that a 30% and below, just specific to those 55,000?
We have not broken out that 55,000 into the sort of proportional share by those AMI categories.
Okay. But those are specific to people experiencing homelessness? No.
They're
I'm
not.
misreading
That's just
it.
the underproduction. If we wanted to front load the past underproduction and produce it in a nearer time frame, that's how many units per year it would require. Do I have that right? So it's all income levels, it's all types of units, it's just quantifying the underproduction from the past and saying if you wanted to try to front load that, it would require greater annual housing production at the rate of 6,000 units per year, just to catch up on those units and to continue to meet the growth as well.
Okay. So those are general catch-up units, 55,000 by 2032.
Overall.
Got it. Overall AMI levels.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that.
It's the total of that. Yeah.
Okay. No edit necessary then. Thank you.
So as I said, first you need to deliberate and accept, reject, change the changes to the executive summary, and then move on to making a recommendation on the housing needs analysis report and the residential BLI. As we sort of indicated in the transmittal, what we did in response to your comments is essentially we flipped the executive summary, and so where previous towards the second half of the executive summary, where we talked about the specific housing needs around affordable housing and accessible housing, we've moved all those talking points up to be the lead of the executive summary. And some of the more basic data about demographic trends and the forecast and the capacity analysis comes second in just sort of the organization. And then we went back through and edited these need findings to highlight some of the issues that you had flagged for us in your discussion. So I think if you want to deliberate whether that...
do I have a motion to accept the executive summary to the housing needs analysis and the changes presented therein?
Can I actually ask a question?
I think deliberation comes, unless it's a question to staff.
It was
right. Okay, go ahead.
I'll just...
We're getting a go ahead from Patricia.
If I remember correctly, there was the matrix of different projects. Is that also part of the executive summary? Or was that a separate?
No, that is a separate document that was provided to you in context for the previous regulatory relief project, just to put those code changes in context of everything we're doing to support housing production.
Great, then I'll potentially address that separately, but I move to accept the executive summary. Is that correct? Oh, phew, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Second.
As
Okay.
revised.
As revised. The revised executive summary to the housing needs analysis. We have a motion by Commissioner Routh, second by Commissioner Patel. Any deliberation? Okay. And are we doing the roll? Okay, let's go ahead and do the roll.
Okay, Alexander. Aye. Lang.
Aye.
Patel. Aye. Ponsel.
Aye.
Routh.
Aye.
Spivak. I don't know if he's here. Thompson.
Aye.
O'Mara.
Aye. The motion carries. Okay.
Okay, now we move on to your recommendation to council. Again, if someone can present this in the form of a motion, then, the 2045 housing needs analysis as amended by your previous motion.
Okay, do we have a motion on behalf of the Planning Commission to repeal the 2009 housing needs analysis, adopt the 2045 housing needs analysis, repeal the residential portions of the 2015 building lands inventory, and adopt the 2023 residential building lands inventory?
So
Vice
moved.
There you go.
Vice Chair Thompson?
I'll second. Did we hear a motion already?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then I'll second.
Okay, any deliberation?
My only thing is on that one matrix thingy, I was just curious where build shift was.
So the matrix that was provided were sort of existing actions that the city has already taken, and build shift or the HART standards is something that is still a work in progress.
Okay.
And so would be part of the sort of future actions part of the strategy.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further deliberation, we can proceed to the roll. Please, Julie.
Okay, Alexander. Lang.
Aye.
Patel. Aye. Council.
Aye.
Routh.
Aye.
Thompson.
Aye.
O'Mara.
Aye. Okay, the recommendation is approved.
Okay, I think that's what, now just a discussion from you all as to, what you would like to see in the transmittal letter to council. And then we will draft that transmittal, share a draft with you all. And I believe it's the November 14th meeting that we'll bring it back to you to vote on, to forward to council, which will hear this item on December 6th.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. So this is, you haven't really done, you've done this maybe once before, but this is just your transmittal letter, transmitting your recommendation to council. It can say not very much, or it can say, we can talk about what it can say. So please let us know if you have any thoughts about things that you want specifically addressed in there. And that would be helpful.
Yeah. Mary Rain O'Mara for the record. I would like, I know there will be reference to the housing needs analysis and buildable lands inventory informing the housing production strategy. I would like an acknowledgement of that 53%, right? And I imagine that will be called out as well since it's in the executive summary, but that 53% of production that does need to be at the affordable levels of 80% and below AMI. And if there's an opportunity to plant a seed in the transmittal letter about, in the production strategy, we will need to dig deep around tools to achieve that production, specifically for the affordable housing need being, just over half of that production. So really just planting a seed with council that we will need to look into tools, financing mechanisms, and other solid strategies for approving that affordable housing production. Other thoughts from commissioners? Vice Chair Thompson.
I had a similar comment, an item to add around the affordability piece, and it was related to the historic underproduction. So that number that we talk about in the executive summary, the 55,000 units, I understand that includes all levels of income, but looking down at the table that was provided like deep in the report that talked about, there was a number that was like 9,300 units that were underproduced, and then it broke them down by AMI level, and only like 50 of those were at the AMI level above 120%. And so I guess my point with that is that I think going forward, when we think about the production strategy and just planting the seed, it is really about the affordability. And that's demonstrated not just by the 53% that you identify going forward, but also historically, we've talked about this trend where it's like the housing production strategy says we need this, and then you basically find that we like build that. Like the numbers are kind of like there historically. So where is the problem occurring? And it's because that underproduction is not meeting the affordability levels that we need. So that's the main thing that I would want to see emphasized.
Thank you, Vice Chair Thompson. Any additional comments or requests? And we will, just to clarify, we will have an opportunity to review the draft as the commission and offer any final comments or changes once that is finalized and sent to council. So is there a deadline though for that? Can you remind us?
At the November 14th meeting, we're gonna have shared a draft of the letter electronically with you, and the expectation is that you would just vote on it and finalize. Is it a formal vote or just finalize the letter? And
it's a formal vote, but there's, I guess, more flexibility in how you edit that letter amongst yourselves ahead of that November 14th meeting.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any additional hands raised or indications that we have comments right now. So I believe that was our last item for the agenda tonight. So we can, go ahead, Commissioner Alexander.
It's more informational, but the actual Housing Regulatory Relief Project memo, it was the last document. And again, maybe I just want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting. It is directed to the Planning Commission, but the staff recommendation proposes that the Planning and Sustainability Commission recommend. I mean, did I miss something or?
I think that's an error.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's just an error.
Yeah, because I just didn't want it to get clawed back 2 months from now. All right. And I didn't start by saying Mike Alexander for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Patel.
Yeah, since you said that, Commissioner Patel for the record. I also echo Chair O'Mara's instruction in the memo about emphasizing production and the toolkit, how we should incorporate some feasibility considerations when it comes to financing construction, because production is an issue. The city has been underproducing housing for decades, so it's important, I think, that we emphasize the component of production and how that is important for the H&A and moving forward for the HPS. So that's all.
Okay. Thank you all so much. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting today. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. Good evening.